And we're now officially live. Welcome to another episode of Lore Ramblings. I'm going to have to change a little bit in the playlists because, well, originally I wasn't sure which book we were going to cover today. It depended on if Tech was here. And he is, but more importantly, well, I guess as importantly, name's Adam.
I'm Tech Priest.
Greg is here, and Greg is currently imbibed.
And I'm Imsit.
So, like I said, originally I wasn't sure if we were going to cover Renegade Crowns, which is a pretty interesting Warhammer Fantasy roleplay book, or Rome. But due to, I can't really say fortuitous circumstances, we decided it's Rome.
Yeah, something I thought might happen did not happen.
Sometimes games just don't happen.
Yeah.
So
our main thing here is that this is one of the larger sections of the book in terms of like page count, because it has to be. This is the genuine section of Rome. Like, this is talking about how do you actually use all these systems and stuff that they've put in just before here, and what is it actually like to be living in this time in Rome for a vampire, and the nitty-gritty details. Not necessarily like the big picture historical view, but like what's actually here. What's actually going on in Rome in terms of where people are and what's important to the vampires here, and what about the necropolis? What is that like, and things like that. They go into quite a bit of detail in this section about basically everything you could want to know about what Rome was like in the late 3rd century.
So basically, this is comparable.
Sorry, late 4th century.
This is comparable to, I know it's unfair to compare this book at all to it, but Berlin by Night did a similar thing with its own description for the city. In fact, most setting books in Vampire do this. And they also do it for the other creatures that go bump in the night. It is designed mainly so that it helps you, the storyteller, know what the hell's going on. For example, you as the storyteller might not know that there's these, I forget the term for it, but there's these little Roman kind of walk-in restaurants that they had. Cocinarias, I think they're called.
Yeah, they don't have those in this book, but they have basically everything that you need for the big detail to make it feel like Rome.
It's all the big details, but a little bit of side readings. I do recommend if you ever go onto other YouTube channels, but not right now. Tasting History with Max Miller's pretty good at that sort of stuff. He has entire little segments on Rome. And one of the concepts that they kind of forget, but it's fair. It's fair. People don't think of this, is there's these things called cocinarias, which are essentially eating establishments, and they run the gamut. There's like the equivalent of Denny's. There's your vendors in the Colosseum, and it's just the little bits of details there. They don't have that, but it's fine. This is a big city. This is going to be a big section of the book, and thankfully, this might be the only time. Well, probably not. Actually, definitely not. But this will be one of the few times we go off tangent because, yeah, we don't need to. This is that big and dense. How big and dense? Check out this map. Oh, Lord, it's making my computer lag. Check out this map of Rome. You have to turn your head sideways, but it really gives you an idea on the scale you're working with.
Rome at this point is easily one of the largest cities in the world. I think you'd have to go all the way to China before you find something that's relatively its size. And this is Rome on decline.
I can disagree. Not Teotihuacan in Central America.
No, this is way before them, though.
No, it isn't. They're about comparable in time period.
Really?
Yes.
I thought the Teotihuacan was only in the 800s.
You might be correct, but I know it was around before then. I do know that at its peak, if you're wondering, Teotihuacan, it's not Tenochtitlan. It's not the Aztec capital.
It's a different city.
It at one point had, I think, something ridiculous like 500,000 people. It is the largest city that ever existed in the Americas.
Pre-Columbus, yeah.
It compares to Rome.
This was Aztec?
No, it was
Mesoamerican.
Not Toltec. I think it was
same
Toltec.
same region.
Same region, but
it was Toltec, I think.
It's definitely not Aztec though. The Aztecs weren't even in the area yet.
Yeah, they were currently hanging out in Arizona. But they have a little map key. Again, occasionally we'll go off tangent, but this is pretty clear and cut and dry, so we'll try to cut down on that.
Yeah. So they're going and they talk about what are the iconic locations of Rome,
Well,
right?
there's the River Tiber, which is well, yeah, it's one of the more important rivers that
Yeah.
ever existed in Rome. It was like
They,
key to its
they
early
go
economy.
over all this, and here's your collection. And they also talk about the fact that like this is the city in the last year of the reign of Constantinius, the son of Constantine the Great.
This is like right before the Romans decided, yeah, this piece of shit's ungovernable. We're moving our governments to Ravenna.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's
Baths of Caracalla, for example. Like, I'm just showing the map key back and forth because, yeah, there's a lot of crap.
Yeah, here this is a pretty good idea of what's the actual like layout of Rome at this time. It's mostly on one side of the river. It is mostly on the hills, as mentioned before.
The 7 hills. And they do mean something. The 7 hills each had its own value, but I think they actually go into detail. So let's just get into the iconic locations.
I don't know if they go into, I can't remember if they go into the hills themselves, but they do go into
They do. I think they
what's,
did in a previous chapter. They talked a little bit about that.
yeah, but in this case they go through what's the actual important things to know about what's going on in Rome.
For
These are the
example,
specific,
the aqueducts and sewage systems.
yes, the Appian Way is still known as the
No, that's
Dripping
the
Arch.
road. That's the big
Yeah.
road. If you're wondering, the Appian Way is kind of possibly one of the first highways besides the Persian. There's the Persian Royal Road, which was comparable, but Rome built a fuckload more of that.
Yeah, sorry, I misread that. It's the arch over is called the dripping road. That part of that road of the Appian Way. The fact of the matter is the Romans were incredibly good civil engineers, as anyone can tell you.
They had their
And the
own. They had
aqueducts-
their own legacy, but they also adapted and learned from the peoples they ran into, particularly the Greeks, which also were fairly good civil engineers. The Romans
Yeah.
then took what they knew and made it better.
Yeah, and in this case, they decided to make well the most crazy aqueducts you could possibly imagine.
What's an aqueduct, by the way?
Aqueduct is it's how you get water from point A to point B.
And there's a couple ways you can do it.
Yeah.
First and more commonly, the ones that you know of are these little archway kind of paths, which drain water from traditionally from higher in the headlands, and drive them into essentially the underground. I think it's an underground component that essentially
These cisterns, yeah.
it leads to cisterns, and then they actually invented plumbing. In fact, actually, the insanity of Rome is sometimes thought to be due to the plumbing, because
they used
piping,
lead pipes. Yeah,
if you're
used
wondering,
lead pipes.
if you're ever wondering why lead has the acronym PB in the periodic table, it's because the Romans named it, I think, plumdum, because it was the metal you made pipes out of.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically the aqueducts would take it from higher headlands waters and put it into the aquifer system here. And there's a bunch of them. There's the Aqua Appia, which is what you were thinking of.
Yeah.
And there's a fuckload of them. By the way, aqueducts were still used as late as the 19th century.
Yes, the Roman aqueducts were, in fact, still in the Middle Ages in use. They were still often.
Fun fact: in Spain, if I recall, I think it was in Spain. It was still used as late as the Napoleonic Wars because if I remember right, one of the battles involved Barcelona, and Barcelona was still using the aqueducts by that point to supply its water partially.
Well, because it worked.
Just worked that well.
Yeah, they work.
They were used regularly in the medieval period. In fact, actually, very commonly used as siege, because if you can cut water to the city, it makes it a lot more likely for them to give up.
Yep.
Oh, and then, yeah, the Aqua Marcia, which crosses the Appian Way. It's known as the Dripping Arch, as you mentioned. And there's a bunch of these. There's a bunch of aqueducts. They're monitored because one of the things that commonly would happen, and this is something in fantasy, if you ever want to like write a setting book, this is something you probably should include. People would actually steal from the aqueducts. You were supposed to have like a water limit, so they had
Yes.
guardsmen just watching the water, and they would like hit you with sticks.
Waiting for
Oh,
people to come up with the
I
buckets
thought you meant
or
steal from an aqueduct. I thought you meant when they fucking broke them apart for fucking loose stones
That
to
too.
build houses.
That
That
too. They
too.
also
That
inspected it
was
for damage.
yeah.
Their duties were to make
Because
sure it flowed because um, Rome is a big city. You don't want a citywide riot. One of the easiest ways to make sure people don't riot is to make sure regular water and food flow happen.
yes.
So there were entire like. In fact, actually, I think that's like one of the duties of the urban cohort that was like set in Rome.
Part of it was to watch over the aqueducts. In fact, they mention here guards across the aqueducts, especially the main ones.
Yep. And
they
go into.
They even give you rules for how do you travel across these.
You can walk in the aqueducts. By the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they give rules because this is a great way for vampires to get around.
Yeah, because you don't have to worry about breathing.
Especially the Nos.
Oh, and also don't forget if you're one of the Morbus, this is a great way to make the plague happen, so you can preach to Jesus about the plague you caused.
Yeah. So here's the next section here when we look at.
Ah yes, Caracalla. We talked about this crazy asshole.
Well, no, I mean the rules. So it's actually quite interesting where they talk about you need at least a couple successes on strength athletics roll to make going against the flow of water, because even kindred, unless you're using your supernatural powers,
have a pretty strong current flow.
They have a strong current flow, and you're going to be fighting against that.
Yeah, it's pretty hard.
It is. And if you fall down,
it's because you start spinning around and get hit all over the place because, well, aqueducts have like little channels that you're supposed to, I believe, step in, and it's also like kind of a stepping system. It's mainly, I think, to assist in making sure things don't break, and also to inspect. So yeah, you're gonna bash your head on corners and all that sort of shit.
Yeah, and if you're, however, for every success, you just subtract 2 points of damage. So
the good part of New World of Darkness. That's the good part of most World of Darkness books is their city research.
Yeah, this is where they go. Hey,
this is where White Wolf and Onyx Path are traditionally at their damn near strongest.
Because I think it's
it just gives you so much detail on the city. Like it's a pretty good little. Not really. It's like better than a tourist guide.
Yeah. I do wonder with these if actually you could use them as a teaching tool.
Somewhat. I wouldn't call it 1-to-1. This isn't the absolute autism that some settings get into.
As mentioned, they don't have the Cochinarias, and they don't have the Tabernas and the other systems of establishments that would be in Rome. Because it's just the major key parts of Rome that you need to know.
The major key parts of Rome and Roman culture that you have. This is not a substitute.
I think Cochinarias are very important. It's just
you're
a vampire. You don't eat.
Yeah, but this is where I go like, okay, this is a game that is written for people to play. This is not a game written by actual medievalists or
if it was medievalists, it'd all be dirt farmers with
sticks.
There are
practicals that have to be taken into account.
Yeah, like Ars Magica, for example, will go into some really weird autistic detail on shit. It's just that they also won't then sit down and say, yeah, we're going to detail the entire city of Budapest to you, because they just don't have time. They're like, we could give you medieval Budapest, but we're not going to, because it's going to take fucking 300 pages.
I'm just envisioning an Ars Magica book where it's just entirely the city of Budapest. It's like 500 pages long, and then it's just right before the author's notice, we warned you, assholes.
Anyway, when the process of travel is unimportant, assume that the character reaches destination taking 15 points of bashing damage.
Which would be basically the equivalent of, for your average person, they'd take 1 point of lethal damage out of this.
7 if they're a kid.
And they'd have to make a roll to arrive conscious, because, quite frankly, if you slip and fall in an aqueduct, no shit, you're gonna knock yourself out.
7 if you're a kindred, which converts to lethal in the normal way once it fills all available health bars.
And that's how the damage system works in New World.
However, for every success on a strength and athletics check, subtract 2 points of the damage pups.
You could just embrace getting the shit knocked out of you, actually, which is funny.
Yeah, for Kindred, it's like, oh, I just took bashing to my final health bar under standard character, which is totally fine.
Brother Iconius, why are you covered in bruises? I went via the Aqua Appia.
Yeah,
But why
but,
though?
but because I could,
Mm.
fuck you. So
Karakara.
the Baths of
Karakara.
Caracalla, the Rome has hundreds of them, but none of them match Caracalla's,
Who
which were
literally did this just as a big PR stunt because Caracalla was a big asshole. And he knew it.
yeah
He knew it. He embraced it, but he also was like, I don't want to be murdered in my sleep.
yeah.
So
More
let's get
accurately,
the poor something to appreciate.
well, yeah, it's the poorest who don't murder you in the sleep. That's the rich. It's
The
more. I don't want to be
influential.
dragged out. I don't want to be dragged out of my house screaming.
Yeah, so the baths are, quite frankly, ludicrous. Like, the only comparable ones are the baths of Nero.
Yeah, and that's just because Nero was a big kind of hedonist in a way.
Kind of.
Most emperors had an element of that.
Yeah, but these were even beyond that.
Because Caracalla's like, I'm going to outdo everyone.
Yeah, 33 acres was on an artificial platform 20 feet above the ground. So you had to walk in for the steps. There's a lot of shops that were placed around this area by, well, everyone that wanted to sell shit, because it's a place that a bunch of people went, because public bathing was a social thing in Rome.
Yep. So you would have, again, I've mentioned Cochinares, but there's also vendors of a variety of items. That were just the thing. Like, this could be where you get new wear because you just cleansed up. So here's some new tunics for you.
New clothes. Oftentimes, when they're talking about stuff like this, people would make would run a racket where they're selling clothes there, and they're also hiring thieves to go out and find people's clothes that are in the baths.
And that's another thing. Yep. You name some type of thing you'd find in an equivalent of a modern strip mall, they probably sell it.
It's probably here.
And you'd also have people screaming the news, the equivalent of the news, because that's a thing.
Yeah, you'd have that sort of stuff going on. You'd also have.
You would get into a debate with your bathmates. That's another thing the baths were known for. This is where you'd actually do a lot of your arguing. Like, you'd just be sitting in a warm bath, scraping yourself with a stick. No, not even kidding. That's how they clean themselves. They used a bit of olive oil and then scraped off the debris with a stick or a sponge.
I wash myself with a rag on a
That's
stick.
literally how the Romans do.
That'd be how they do.
But you'd be doing it, and you'd be like arguing about the newest grain shipments, like, and how they're not as good because the dirty Egyptians did not give you enough.
Yeah.
Like, you'd be arguing politics there. You'd be scraping up. Let's just say it's also where you plow. This is where you also.
There's a lot of fucking in the baths. Yes. This is oftentimes, it's generally daytime. There are no prostitutes. As soon as the nighttime comes around, that's when the prostitutes come and ply their trade.
And that's
at
where
the
Deva come in.
Yep. When we go in, we talk about this sort of stuff where they go and they even detail the actual building, which is, here's the length of it. It's symmetrical. There's a central access path, and there's a.
Oh yeah, they also have the Temple of the Nymphs because those were small water spirits.
Yes, they do. They then also have a garden, a small stadium.
Don't forget the 1,000 slaves that just guided the internal heating systems.
Yes.
Which fun fact, the Baths of Caracalla were the inspiration for earlier models of internal heating.
Yes, they were.
Because of how cleverly they were designed.
Yes, they were designed so that you would have furnaces underneath the baths themselves.
Not just the baths, but also the meeting hall, which was used in the event that the baths couldn't be used because of poor weather.
Yeah.
So you had it had internal heating.
Yeah, it's also to note that this is also it doubles as a gym. So you would go here, you do your athletic stuff, you do all that, you take a bath, and that's kind of the thing that you do.
Anyway, I suspect we're going to see a boob. So
yeah, there's some boob.
I'm going to
tasteful boobage.
I'm going to jump a page down a bit so we don't. Oh, there's the guy. Ah, yes, I'm being soothed by a deva.
Yes.
And
So
and one thing, these baths, were they public?
yes,
Yes.
they were. These were public baths. You'd oftentimes have to pay a small fee to use them, but they were open to the public.
They were open to the public, and as long as you weren't completely poor, like as long as you had decent amount of money on hand, it's the equivalent of middle
You could get
class, you could,
basically
yeah.
everything like you could get everything you wanted here. You could get a meal,
So long
a
as you weren't
bath,
a
a hooker,
goddamn serf or a slave.
even
So it's like,
slaves.
No,
If they're
even
given
slaves
money,
were
they'd
allowed
still
because it was
yeah.
traditionally seen as a good thing to at least give them a wage.
Yeah, slaves oftentimes Roman slaves, at least personal slaves, were given a a small
Stipend.
wage. It was
And
not
if they were
unusual
clever,
for the
and if a slave
yeah.
was relatively clever, they might be able to get a little bit extra because they manage a lot of household tasks.
Yeah.
So they might be able to squirrel away a denarii or two besides
so
their
this,
wage.
so the baths are just a YMCA.
It's a YMCA where you also cruise, and you can
Yeah.
also eat yourself sick on cochlea, which are snails. If you're
Yeah,
wondering,
on just
the concept of eating snails was a Roman thing. The French kept it.
the
Uh,
Romans ate a lot of weird shit by our
cochlea,
standards.
which is fried snails in, I think, a garum paste. They
Yeah.
also were in love with there's this type of spice called asafoetida, which smells like ass. Like it is a rotten, putrid smell. But they were in love with putting it on chicken because that's how the Parthians ate it. Because it's a spice from native to Persia.
Yeah.
Very
And
pungent, very. It has that, that stank that sometimes items have that it cooks away or it enriches the flavor.
yeah. Yeah. I
That
know what
is
you're
how it
talking
do.
about. Now can we talk about the baths so we can finish this page?
Oh yeah, well there's the Tepidaria, which is
Yeah, the Tepidarium, which is the warm pool. There's the Caldarium, which is the hot pool.
and then there's the
the
cold pool.
which is they already mentioned, which is the Frigidarium. The generally they say is that the influence of the baths is it's very much after dark a kindred style place. Like it is, uh, they've got a bit of stringing. The baths remain open at night, and that the authorities turn a blind eye to what kind of happens after dark.
So again, here's a comment. It's acceptable to proposition fellow bathers as soon as the sun sets. Uh, and respectable women or men with virtue are not expected to show up. Odds are you're probably still going to see them show up though.
Yeah, like this
It's
is
Rome.
where you go
Rome
for
is
casual
two-faced.
hookups,
Yeah.
and also just to bang.
Funnily enough, the Turks actually recreated the spirit in the form of their bathhouses,
Yes, the uh,
which is not
and
surprising. They did take the Byzantine Empire, so it's not
yeah,
surprising
they did
they
call themselves the
redeemed it.
Sultan, the true inheritors of Rum. So
So it's not surprising they also liked the public bath system.
yeah. In any case, they talk about the fact of the matter is that they go into also then like what do you actually do here? So there are tunnels that connect the baths into the necropolis. There are a couple of entertainments that can be found there, like slaves that are generally able to be fed on. And they even talk to you about the fact that the bodies of, if you drain someone dry, a good way to get rid of them is to bring them here and chuck them in the furnaces.
Yeah, because it's a good way to dispose. Because especially
No one's
during the.
going to double check.
Also, if you do it right, it'll just smell like someone's cooking some pig,
Yeah.
which
During
they
the
would
night, it
be.
should be fine.
And
So
and they
they,
go. Oh no, they also go into a bit of power play because one of the major Senex members actually uses this as their kind of base of influence.
yes.
And it also tells you up front that oh, I just realized. I think the lady who is naked and that guy I think is the urban prefect.
It's
I,
very possible. It
I
might
think
also
that's
just be
her and
some
him.
sucker who's about to get eaten.
Yeah, it could be. As for story use, the Baths of Caracalla are mainly used to hunt or to meet with your mortal ghoul agents or just mortal agents that you work with.
Yeah, because it's after dark
It's
and
after
it's
dark. The baths are open.
relatively private. It's common courtesy to not look at people too much in the baths.
Well, yeah, because this is after dark. You know.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy. Just you walk in with your agent Jacobus, and you just kind of sit in the tepidarium. And after shooting, making sure you're not suspicious by shooting shit, complaining about the Sassanids, you then just kind of, as no one's looking, just going, yeah, did you kill that guy yet?
Yeah. They then go into the most important piece of entertainment in the city at this point, even beyond really the Colosseum, which is the Circus Maximus.
Okay, before we get in, from Scroll Killer, wasn't paying your slaves well a way to flex wealth for? Yes.
Yes, it was. It was considered a very high class way to flex and show off how wealthy you were. Because if you're wealthy enough that you can pay your slaves like you would a servant, well, you're
At
pretty
that point,
fucking wealthy, aren't you?
at the point, what's the point of having a slave?
Well, the point of having a slave is that you have a slave. The point of paying them like you would a servant is to flex on the poors.
Yep. Also, you were kind of expected to give them small, because the idea is that slaves are eventually able to either buy their contract out,
Or their
or
contract expires.
yeah, it's one or the other. So it's a good way to flex. Like, I'm so rich, I could just get more slaves because, oh, they bought their contract out. Don't worry, I have like a fucking 100 of them.
Yeah, it's a great way to show that first off that you are in fact very wealthy, and second off that you
You're
are a
generous.
generous person.
I'm a generous.
Again, yeah, Romans are two-faced. But yeah, the Circus Maximus. Okay, so essentially,
oh boy,
okay, so gladiatorial combat is very popular. It's like it is genuinely the pro wrestling of the ancient world. But it has nothing on races. Imagine if you took the Indy 500, the fucking Peloton, NASCAR, all of your racing, and just fuse it together into one meth-fueled, insane football fanatic style insanity. That is how the racing circuit was. It's so bad that the Byzantines, which also kept the tradition of chariot and horse racing, actually had minor civil wars over which team fucking won during that year.
There were originally 4. There's now down to 2 teams: the greens and the blues. The circus is actually a pretty large arena.
It is big even back then.
Even by modern standards, it's pretty sizable.
Yeah, it can hold about 200,000, which is insane.
Standing room, notably, but not sitting. Standing room. It is incredibly large. It is incredibly popular. It doesn't always hold that many people, obviously.
And on top of that, you know how you can make the racing even more amazing? Guess what? They do bring up tabernas. So, okay, if you're wondering, Cochinaria is the Roman equivalent of a restaurant or food stall. A taberna is an eatery that also tends to serve alcohol, and in most cases, they might even have an inn or two to sleep in, like a couple of rooms available.
I think it's where the word tavern.
Yeah,
I was about to say.
It has to, yeah.
Well, it's because tabernas. So the Romans had a system. I'm very quick off topic. Romans had a system where they would build inns, which that's also comes from Rome. I forget the term it came from. And tabernas were inns that served alcohol. It eventually came to include any eatery that included liquor and often had some form of accommodation. So tabernas were built into basically could buy space, because that's another thing the Romans had. You could buy the concept of buying space in the equivalent of a strip mall. They're the ones that came up with that.
Oh, wait, so this is in the surface. So this is tailgating.
Yes, this is no, this is not tailgating.
Imagine, so the Circus Maximus is this huge structure, and they had these internal little cubbies, the equivalent of a strip mall. You could contract out with, say, the emperor or whoever that it deals with the circus, like the runner of the Circus Maximus. I have this space. I use this to sell food. I use this to sell booze. We serve barbarian grain wine, and crap like that. And there's a better deal.
Otter noses. What was it? What's the thing from Monty Python's Life of Brian? Otter noses fish nipple chips or something like that.
Yeah, you could do that. You could have an entire stall dedicated to that.
Yeah.
And also, obviously, prostitutes. There were
Lots of
brothels built in
hookers.
them.
Holy shit, lots of hookers.
There were brothels built in, specifically just so that, like, in between races, you could plow, and then you could plow as you hear about races, and then riot in the streets when your team loses.
You know, again, family-friendly entertainment here, folks.
Was this actually families
Yes.
would attend it?
Yes.
Yes, families would, because while yes, it's sleazy, it's often a lot more common. What would happen is you would take little. Let me think. You would take little
Claudius?
Tiberius. You're Marcus. You bring in your little boy Tiberius, your wife Julia, and you know you go to watch the Blues and hope they don't lose, because otherwise you will use your sword that you had from your time in the Legion to stab a bitch. And as you're walking along, you can get little promotional items from racers because they had sponsors to help to make your son happy because Tiberius likes this one racer. You can enjoy
I like
the
the red
equivalent of
one.
a Roman hamburger because they had something similar to the hamburger steak, and you're just sitting there enjoying. And then when the team loses, you take your sword and you stab the nearest local Green supporter. Fun for the family.
In any case,
I'm not
there
kidding.
are
That is an actual thing.
occasionally, though, they do have night races. It's not extremely common, but they do happen, and they're of course very popular because it's a novel experience for a lot of people. It's like the same thing with out at the arena is that yes, they would in fact have fights at night where they basically set up large lights to illuminate
Great
the
torches that are mirrored. They actually invented these convex mirrors that worked as floodlights using the torch.
yeah,
Fucking
Romans
Monday
were
Night
smart.
Football.
Yeah, they would
basically
do
yeah.
that. This is your modern day NASCAR / football. Oh, and on top of that, besides the food and the entertainment, you also had games of gambling using like liar's dice, knuckle bones and liar's dice. They were usually little gaming tables. And on
Yeah, they'd
top of
have a
that, you could even then go to the nearest oracle, the nearest fraud, and you could actually use them to place bets because they're like, I predict using the organs of this pigeon I caught, this rock dove I caught, that your team shall lap them, and you can make bets based on them, and they would get paid for their predictions.
yes.
It's an amazing like fucking ecosystem, and I love how they go into details about that.
So there are in fact occasionally charioteers that become kindred.
Oh yeah, and they usually are solely for night races.
Yeah, it's also when and night races are often times where there are a few people that get killed
Because
because it's a
again,
nighttime race.
the racing teams are very competitive. I'm not fucking with you, in that minor civil wars have been fought over the outcomes of these.
There's also the rather fun bit here where they
So,
mention
like during the chaos, you could get away with icing someone.
yes, you could.
Oh, it was just a sports riot. Don't worry.
Riots were not uncommon at these events because, as mentioned before, this is a bunch
I
of
honestly
hooligans.
swear, I think it was a Byzantine emperor was deposed by a rival just because
There
of a
was,
sports team.
yes.
Just because they were an opponent of their sports team. I'm not even kidding.
Maybe
There's the Nika riots, which are probably what you're thinking of, which are a
Yeah.
little more complicated than that, but we're not going to go into that. There's, of course, then the Flavian Amphitheater, which, as we all know, is the Coliseum.
Oh, they
This
also
is
get
the
no.
large.
They also have little equipment bonuses to go into
Oh yeah,
details.
they do. Extra hunting rolls, stealth rolls, and crowds. A nice little plot hook, which is that oh yeah, that obelisk came from Thebes, and there's writing on it. See what's on it.
Because there's a
Maybe
big
there's something
obelisk
special.
that they stole from Egypt to put there just to make it look cooler.
Yeah.
And then Constantius built a bigger one because it's like, yeah, I'm T-posing to assert dominance over you, Egypt. But yes, the Flavian Amphitheater. This is your Colosseum. This is the Colosseum, and this is it back in the day. I'm going. Let's go into it because it's really cool. I think it could hold up to it could hold up to 80,000 standing, which is as big as
Seat.
some modern stadiums, by the way.
It
Yeah.
says seat 80,000.
Oh yeah, it can
I don't even
seat
know.
that. Yeah, yeah. It's as
There's
big as
80
some modern
entrances.
stadiums.
Yeah, there's 80 entrances, 76 of which are for the general public.
One specifically for the Emperor.
Yeah, it's got it had like retractable roofs. It had
Yeah, it had
basically everything
retractable.
old is new again.
Like,
When
you
we're
know
talking
those
about stadium
stadiums with the
technology.
domes? Yeah, the Coliseum had that. Here's another cool thing about the Coliseum. It was waterproofed. So what they do on very special occasions was, instead of a traditional gladiatorial fight, they would have mock naval fucking combat using
They'd build,
replicas of like
yeah,
little biremes and shit where they would
yeah.
fight.
They'd make like little tiny ships for like rowboats for like 6 people, and they'd roll them around in the
And
arena
they
in
would
like
flood the
waist deep water.
Coliseum because it is
Yeah,
actually waterproofed.
yeah. It wasn't like very deep water. It was maybe like neck deep, but
Yeah?
it's still impressive that they were able to do that.
Like, again, these are special occasions, but the Colosseum was designed to be this massively flexible, and it was built by Flavius. That's why it's called
Well,
that.
it started by Flavian,
Started
finished by
by
his son.
Flavian. Yep. But it's a very impressive piece of architecture that unfortunately was raided over the centuries to build other buildings in Rome until it was saved by archaeology. About I think, what was it, a third of it was ripped apart to build shit in Rome.
Yeah, like the Flavian amphitheater was a very popular source for stone for a variety of building projects.
Because the stone it was comprised of was very tough, durable, because it was designed to be. It was designed to last as long as it could.
And also because like well, they're all really neatly cut. They're nice and easy.
Expertly cut, reinforced with Roman cement, which, if you're wondering, one of the cool things about Roman cement is it actually got tougher when exposed to seawater or dampness.
Yeah.
Just due to its chemical composition, the volcanic ash, it does something in the presence of salt water.
Yeah. In any case, when we go into the whole thing with the
So here's the thing: it's not just gladiatorial and throwing people in the beasts. There are also contest, like actual like contests of strength, or just showing off like performances. It
there's
was
a lot
used for
of
rock bands too, the equivalent of rock bands.
yeah, it was used for basically everything. A lot of it was used for was animal shows, like basically a zoo, where
So, like,
occasionally the
check
animals
out
would eat
this
each other.
unicorn we found, and you see a rhinoceros, and it makes confused bellowing noises.
Yeah. There was a time, as mentioned before in this book, that they tried to savage someone to death with seals, which didn't work.
That's the most adorable way.
No. Come here, folks. We have found the legendary monkey man of India, spoken of by Alexander the Great.
The legendary monkey.
Indian.
Behold the monkey man, and it's like a gorilla just scratching its head.
Not
like,
even a gorilla. It'd be like it's like a baboon or something.
It's like a baboon, and it just kind of like gives a fear grimace as they give it a knife.
Yeah.
They give it a knife.
Oh, that's actually terrifying. Baboon with a knife.
I'm actually now envisioning, just as a joke, like, you could do this as here's a fun storyteller idea. You set up because they have beast combats where this was traditionally used with either criminals that were not severe enough to be killed, or it was a way for gladiators to flex more, because there were gladiators who mainly fought animals.
Yeah.
So I'm just envisioning you do that, but you set it up by having like baboons with knives.
I mean,
You have Brother Worm train them in the art of knife.
well,
Come on, don't you want Brother Worm to teach baboons how to knife people?
animalism actually isn't a clan discipline of the Nosferatu in New World. They get obfuscate a new one, which is called Nightmare, which is about causing hallucinations and fear.
I sometimes confuse. If you're wondering, I sometimes confuse clans, fellas.
Mind you, it wouldn't be too hard for them to pick up animalism, as it's a general discipline.
You get the gangrel to teach them to stab people with knives.
You get the gangrel to do it, or you can even do it with the Nosferatu. They can just have learned animalism. It's not like it's a clan restricted thing.
Rocks are also expensive to move long distances, and hey, look, a big pile of rocks.
Yep.
That's why Constantine stole half of Rome to build up Byzantium into Constantinople.
Yep. And then we get into the equipment bonuses, which are pretty simple. +2 to all combat totals, because there's a fucking ton of weapons in here.
Oh, also, unlike the Circus Maximus, which sometimes does have night races, Flavian Amphitheater traditionally doesn't,
Yeah,
except for rare occasions, very rare
very
occasions.
rare.
Like the Circus Maximus is traditionally the one that did night things. Instead, this is where you meet, and this is where, if you want to have kindred like gladiatorial fights, this is where you do it.
Yeah.
It's mostly for meeting, though. There's also the Hypogeum, which is where if you want to get an army of baboons armed with knives, this is how you do it.
Yep, this is where you go. This is basically the zoo under the city. It's pretty neat.
I just keep forgetting that the New World NOS does not get animalism, because that's like one of their big things in Old World.
It is. I'd say Nightmare is more than adequate as a
Oh,
replacement,
it is.
though.
Like, I'm not complaining. If Nightmare is pretty amazing. Like, it's just so yeah. Story use. This is just where you meet mainly, or hang out with animals if you're that type. Ah, yes, the Roman Forum. This is the key to all Roman life.
Yeah, this is the Roman Forum. It houses a lot of other buildings around it. It is
It
where
is
the
where
Sacred Way
announcements
is.
are made. Sacred Way. This is where your temple processions go through. This is where you get your news from traditionally. Criers were hired to basically shout news. This is where any asshole, like you could get, this is where originally the Sibyllines would come on and scream Magna Mater as they castrate themselves before they were banned completely for ever doing that.
And then they still just kept doing it, and nobody could really stop them because they're fucking crazy.
This is where the hobo who thinks they're Diogenes shows up with their barrel around their naked body, screaming, "This is what man is!" holding like a beheaded chicken. This is man. Like,
Yeah.
this is where you're crazy. This would be the equivalent of where your talk show radio hosts would be in this time period, and this would be where they get crank called.
Yeah.
The two coolest things that Rome that never gets talked about: the Triumph and the Circus Maximus. Meanwhile, the Colosseum is constantly pointed out, and only the boring part. Yeah, people always forget about the cool part where you can flood it, and that it had the Astrodome ability of covering itself.
Oh, don't forget the elevators. It had
Oh yeah, the
elevators.
proto elevators. The fact that it was used as a biological zoo, and again, just like the Circus Maximus, but with less horrors, they also had a lot of restaurants and tavernas.
Yep.
Either within or nearby. And last but not least, people always forget about the gladiator sponsorships.
Yeah, and also the fact is that most of these gladiator fights were not to the death, and that there were also a lot of executions, just flat out executions done at the arena.
Yeah, because that's where you get your criminal. Like, if you know a criminal is, going to be killed, just send them out against a gladiator with a knife.
Do it either as a gladiatorial fight, or
A beast
more
fight.
often, a beast. Basically, you execute them by throwing them to a lion in the arena, or whatever else. They'd also do just flat out public executions. Like, this guy has been convicted of this crime. We're just gonna go and fucking crucify him right here in front of everybody, so you can all see it.
I'm just envisioning a beast fight where someone trains a gorilla to wield a fucking falx blade.
That is animalism right there.
Come on, can't you envision a gorilla with like a warhammer or something stupid like that? Just
that's high level animalism, and it is terrifying.
I think I gave him an idea for a Requiem of Rome thing.
I have, and it's
But yeah, the Forum is very important to Roman life. To give you an idea, it's open space. There's a lot of very important buildings. There's the Temple of Julius Caesar, and on top of that, this is where the Forum is actually the home of the Pontifex, which is the head of religious ceremonies in Rome.
right.
And on top of that, this is where the
When you
temple
mean-
of the Vestal Virgins are. The
When you mean
goddess of the hearth.
Pontifex,
Oh,
you mean
Pontifex Maximus,
Chris-
the head of the.
Christian or for?
Oh no,
No, not
Pontifex.
Christian at all.
The term pontiff refers to an old Roman title called Pontifex, which was the head of, I believe it was either the Temple of Jupiter, or it was the equivalent of the head of the temple.
Yeah.
Their main duties were to administer religious rites and to, I think, assess the upkeep of the temples, and also to ensure that rituals went well and the gods were pleased. Like, that's their main thing. They were a it's a fucked up. Imagine if, for example, you gave a priest or a rabbi partial like they also had to run like the administrative side. It's like one part bureaucrat, one part priest. That's what the
Oh God,
pontifex was.
doesn't sound good.
Uh,
It
they
was a
could.
relatively powerful position,
It was
but it
relatively
was nothing like
powerful,
the
but
Pope.
yeah, they didn't have that full authority.
They at least have the fancy hat.
Yes.
They did have fancy. They did
Yay.
have fancy garb to a degree. Just not the. No, it's just not the cap, not the
Yeah,
mitre.
they didn't have the hat, but they did have fancy outfits and stuff. That's just kind of how it is.
On top of
Back
that,
in the
the
day.
forum is also at the Senate House, so if you want to heckle the senators, you could. If you felt like not living that day.
Yeah, there's also, of course, the various columns that have been erected by various emperors.
Or
There's
stolen from various places around the world. That's
yeah,
another thing they did.
they have a few other
Oh, there are two sites that are really important. The Lapis Niger, which is a slab of black marble that's fenced off with white. That's for the kindred.
yeah,
They think that this is maybe the tomb of Romulus. I mean, the
perhaps
people. We don't know.
yeah.
Now, to the kindred, this is where Remus made his pact with the owls.
Yeah, this is what that means to the kindred, which is, here you go. And then there's, of course, the Lactus Curtis, an area near the center, marked off by marble and surrounded by altars.
Oh, they go into
Supposedly,
a bit of detail. The Traditores.
yeah,
What are the Traditores? I
the
think.
traitor clan.
Oh, the
It's
ones that
been
are
so long,
probably the
yeah.
Ventru.
The ones that are probably the venture that I had that
Ah.
whole, yeah.
He also overturned the column, leaving only its base intact. And the second one is the Lacus Curtius, an area near the center of the forum marked off with a marble railing and surrounded by altars.
Yep.
Essentially, this is a little area, a little priest area. For the kindred, this is just where the fuck up happened. Oops, we accidentally broke open to the surface. Oh, Caesar was Pontifex Maximus and abused the fuck out of it in Paul. Yeah, he would. They go into details. The Senex ordered all passages leading to the necropolis to be sealed, and those walls
And
can
the
be
walls,
seen. Yep.
yeah. Legends tell, of course, a great treasure is hidden in there, and occasionally younger kindred try to get in there. Again, plot hooks that are integrated directly into the setting itself, which is a nice little touch.
And for story uses, yeah, the Lapis Niger has close links to the evil owls. So if you're having a bad day or you're worried about the owls because like the ST is like hinting at them, that probably means they want you to go there.
The tunnels are in fact real. The Nosferatu know about them. Young kindred hear about legends.
Yep.
And
This is just a nice little refuge area for you.
it's just a nice little detail of, oh, here's an area. It doesn't necessarily have to have any mechanical effects. Here you go. The Isium Campsi is the largest temple to Isis and Serapis.
Because
Within,
out of all of the foreign gods the Romans adapted, Isis/Serapis, because they were kind of considered both indifferent, very fucking popular deity in the East, and the Romans actually picked it up on its worship pretty easily.
Why?
The way the Romans, it's kind of an artifact from the Greek thought as well, where the Greeks kind of saw that these gods were actually just different faces of theirs. For the Romans, they picked gods that traditionally gave advantages because the Romans were very much of the if it aids me in winning, I'll fucking do it. And worshiping Isis in her role and Serapis as the role gives them an advantage in either assuring the people of the East that they're not completely foreign, or just because they really like that aspect of the deity. It's similar to how Sol Invictus was actually them taking Helios because they liked him a lot more than Apollo. It's just a weird Roman thing. They just kind of really liked her.
Yeah.
It's really strange. Isis, for example, is revered as the goddess of sailors, which is a little bit surprising, but not if you remember that.
Serapis is not the same as Isis at
I'm
all.
wrong.
At all.
Yeah, I'm wrong.
Yeah, no. Isis and Serapis are very, very different deities.
I got it
I was just
wrong.
kind
It
of
happens.
yeah.
I'm not familiar with all the lesser deities. I know Isis.
Well, Isis. Well, Serapis is actually a Greek syncretic deity that was brought into Egypt.
Oh yeah,
Sort
by the
of.
Ptolemies. That's why I was confused.
Yes, that's why you were getting confused. And his worship was brought back to Rome after Egypt joins the empire. He was never an extremely popular god, but he was very closely associated with Isis to a lot of people because they're both Egyptian gods. So
Yeah,
they
that's
kind of
why I
doubled
was
up the temple.
confuzzled. Is Serapis based on Asclepius?
No,
know.
he's not really. He's just kind of weird.
I don't remember what Serapis covered. I know Isis covers, I think, life and the waters and nourishment to a degree. And other portfolios, Isis had a lot of roles. But yeah, it's not surprising that the Romans found her popular because you got to remember, most of the shipment of grain to the city came from fucking Egypt.
But yes, in
She
any case,
represented Egypt.
the priests and priestesses of the temple here are very well known. They're considered to be somewhat magical by a lot of people.
Well, yeah, priests are supposed to have some, because also Isis was treated as a mystery cult by the Romans, which meant they had a lot of pageantry that was hidden behind doors. The reason it was called a mystery is it's like the equivalent of a frat society where all the rituals inside are kind of kept hidden, but and they have a few public, real ones that they show off.
Yeah. But in any case, the temple devices they go into a bit about that. Yes, here's the scoop. The temple itself right now, as violence against pagans is rising again within Rome, there are some issues with followers of ISIS getting jumped in the streets again. Or the problem is that the priests do in fact have some mystical power, it seems, and there may in fact be a link of that to the blood magic of the kindred. We don't know yet.
Well, it's
They
because
don't know themselves.
Here's the thing: Isis is also popular among the Maquette.
Yes, she is, and Isis is also a goddess of magic.
Mm-hmm.
So couldn't the awakened?
It could be that you could easily have a mage running in here, but most likely,
yeah.
most likely it would be basically a hedge wizard or a second sighter, like a sorcerer, not exactly
Second
like a full blown.
or again, Maquette blood magery.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the sort of. I doubt that that you'd have an awakened mage here at this point in time.
If you're the ST and this is Rome, you can if you want.
You can easily have that, but I'd also note that if that's the case, your players will hate you because any mage that has survived long enough to learn 4 dots in an Arcanum will probably be able to just murder them.
And also, their worship is remember, the Romans are very stern. I mean, they're hypocritical, but they like sternness. Easterners tend to have a lot more pageantry with their religions.
Yes.
They're not as crazy as the Civili. They don't scream as they cut their nuts off. They don't do that. But like they'll fucking go full drugged out psycho dance.
Yeah.
And there are other Eastern gods that had temple prostitutes. Isis is not one of them. I'm gonna say
Isis is relatively tame.
Isis is tame, but still has the Eastern taint, as the traditionalist Romans would complain about.
Yeah, and they would complain. Oh boy.
Meanwhile, they indulge in all of it equally because Rome.
Exactly. So the next is, of course, the Mausoleum of Augustus, which, well, actually,
pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, the temple does in fact give a bonus to magical rituals invoking her, which, no surprise. The Mausoleum of Augustus, though, is very important. It is still around. It's about 300 feet in diameter, clad in marble. Several tiers with evergreen tiers planted in the lowest and a mound of earth, which is meant to replicate a lot of the archaic burial mounds that are found across the region.
Yeah, because Augustus wanted to kind of really tie his roots, and the roots of Rome into the old.
Yes, he's kind of doing his how do I put it? This is his tomb is as much propaganda as basically everything else he ever did.
Because that's the thing about Augustus is this is the
He
man who on his deathbed is rumored to have said, I've played my part well.
yeah.
Like he was always thinking of politics whenever he did anything.
Yeah.
But also, an entrance to the necropolis is included in the plans because, come on, it's Augustus. He would know, and he would try to work with the fucking undead.
Or more likely, the Senex probably, importantly, made themselves. They probably dug a hole there.
Either or, but come on, if Augustus knew, which he might have, he would. He would have exploited them for all he could, without overreaching. That's
Yeah.
just how he was.
Yeah, it's noted though that it wasn't.
Out
He
of all the
didn't
Roman
know
emperors,
earlier.
he's the one that, if he knew, yeah, he would have actually worked with them probably, at
Yeah,
least as
but he
well as he
didn't
could,
know, as noted earlier. They avoided him.
for good reason.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, Augustus is that type of person who, even if you don't underestimate, he'll probably still win.
Yep.
He was just that fucking good. So yeah, there's a bit of a hole there. It's store use. Essentially, this is where Vampire Court is.
Yeah, this is where they do treason trials. The
Vampire Court.
necropolis is
Literal night court.
God damn it. Anyway, Pantheon. The Pantheon of Rome is very different from the Pantheon of Athens, which is also known as the Acropolis up there.
By the way, both of them are still around. The Pantheon of Rome is still around.
The Pantheon of Rome is still around.
It's a very different looking structure. It's not that traditional kind of Greek like colonnade thing. It's not like the Acropolis.
No.
It's more like a big fucking circle.
Yeah, it's got a dome.
Hmm?
It also, I want to note this, it also has been, by this point, it's been a church as well as being what it was before. It's had a very interesting history across the centuries.
Yeah, because the three opposite entrances, for example, they put a lot of effort into thinking, how would we make a multi-tool temple? And one of the things they did was to figure out where each god placement should be. Because the three that would oppose the entrance were Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, which were the main three that the original Romans worshipped. Like, they were the big three originally.
Yeah, there are none.
Also, fun fact that Jupiter's likenesses is also slightly modeled on Heracles as well as a little bit on Augustus, because of course he would.
Yeah,
He would.
It was actually Agrippa who did it, but same thing.
It's something. Come on. Oh, look at that Nosferatu chain to the thing.
Yeah, you see, the really neat thing about the Parthenon, and why it's the Pantheon and why it's kind of really a unique building is that there's this big hole in the center of the roof that will go through there, and it's meant to line up with like the solar solstice and things like that. It's very neat. It's very well designed. But also this means that yes, you can get into this building as a kindred if you can climb. Even at night, doesn't matter what, you can still get into it, and you can use it as a refuge. Now, the problem with that is that you can use it as a refuge, but the sun will eventually get you in there.
Yeah, it's popular with the kindred. It's kept open at night to serve the devotions of the pagans among them.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is that because the owls are haunting them more and more at this time period. Yeah, the owls just don't go in there.
Yes. And kindred will occasionally chain up a vampire and toss him in the middle of the Pantheon, because fuck them. The sun will get them. They can't run away. Even if they break free of those chains, if they've locked the doors,
as there's no escape from the temple and nowhere to hide from the sun.
Yeah.
It is used for official executions. Just see, Augustus's tomb is where the trial happens. This is usually how they execute you.
Yeah. Then there's the Portus Minica, which is a very important part of the Roman culture this time, which is that the grain dole, also known as the corn dole.
Because corn was originally used for any type of grain.
Yeah. You see, remember when we were talking about how earlier about the aqueducts and how you needed a lot of water to keep a city like this running and a lot of food? This is how Rome maintained a large population for quite a long time. Was that instead of, having everybody pay for food, is that you could have a certificate for your family that would entitle you to a set amount of bread per day.
Which I think is isn't that how the Soviets did it to a degree?
Somewhat. And
It's kind of how. It's just a
it's kind
welfare
of how
service.
like every social service ever has worked,
Yeah.
basically. The Romans just did it earlier. It's like a giant food bank where they had a bunch of ovens.
And it
that
is a
served-
gigantic fuck-off food bank, by the way. It is
It
huge.
is.
To give you an idea, it is a long fucking colonnade divided into 45 sections.
Yeah.
It's essentially this super huge area where they have a bunch of ovens to bake your bread, and as long as you're certified, you get the minimal amount to survive. Oh, and you have a metal ticket, by the way. Because
Yeah,
that's
you
the
do.
way it works. You had a raffle, like, on your day. Like, it determines what day of the month you can show up.
And if you show up and if you're in time, you get all the free food.
And
Well,
they can be passed down through families or sold to others.
Yep. It's
also called the frumentarium.
Yeah, they go through a lot of like the way that this works is that there's risk of fire, there's risk of theft.
Yeah.
Anything that disrupts the grain dole will likely draw the wrath of everyone there.
Yeah, not just the poor, but like reminder, the emperor and the soldiers know that if the grain dole is disrupted, and that means the poor can't get their bread, they will riot throughout the city well before they starve.
Yeah.
So everyone, like, if you're a stupid asshole and try to ruin this, everyone will gather up and beat you.
And also, if you somehow survive that, the Senex will go after you.
Because instability in Rome is bad for them.
Yep, the Camarilla is invested in the stability of Rome in terms of, well,
like, to give you an idea, another duty of the urban cohort, the praetorians, when they're not overthrowing their emperors or playing politics, besides covering the aqueduct, this is their other main duty. They stand watch over this to make sure no dumbass causes problems by trying to steal all the bread, or some maniac doesn't try to set fire to something. And to also help put out fires when they do happen, because giant grain ovens.
Yeah.
This is where the Kindred. This is a recruiting place for the Kindred.
It is.
This is where you get your ghouls.
Yep, it's a great place to do it. And then we get lastly, the last really detailed spot where it's like the rest of them. It's like here's the list
I like this area. As a result, the poor of Rome know that if you collect your dole after dark, you might be offered a well-paying work by a monster from the underworld.
Yeah.
Yeah, the poor all kind of know rumors of, like, they know that the Municium usually doesn't stay open after dark, but they shouldn't, but they do, mainly because they just have to.
Yeah.
But they also know if you're relatively lucky, you can get your bread there, and also sometimes a corpse will shamble towards you and like, I need you for a job.
I need you to give you a job. Yeah. It's just one of those things. St. Peter's Basilica is the next one, which is pretty.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest Christian buildings.
Yeah, the original one is not extremely large. It does not actually have the body in there. As long as we know of.
You're familiar with in the Vatican. No, that's like building iteration, I think 7 or 8.
Yeah, the main thing is that it has a bunch of columns. They're all kind of random. It's the largest church in Rome, but it is not actually the cathedral.
No,
This
it
means
started life as a tomb for, well, the saint himself.
yes.
One of the 12
So
apostles, he who, if you're wondering, I know a little bit of his death is interesting, and this is the thing that I like to bring up because it's a big middle finger to Satanists who use the upside down cross. That St. Peter's cross, he intentionally asked to be crucified upside down since he didn't want to go the like he was being set to be crucified. He just merely asked, "Could you do it upside down so I don't mirror Jesus?" He requested a different cross so he didn't match Jesus's crucifixion.
yeah.
And the Romans actually accommodated it because he was still going to die, and it probably was worse because he was upside down.
Yeah. Well, actually, it would have knocked him out pretty quickly.
Yeah, but they accommodated him. So yeah, if you ever see a Satanist using that cross, know that it's actually the symbol of Saint Peter, the founder of the Catholic Church. Whoops.
Yeah, but yes, the hill, there's a circus, there's a hill, there's a bunch of other stuff around it. The basilica is kept open all night, mostly because the vampires have been getting their influence in there to say
Oh yeah,
we
also
want to
the
be able to
Lateran
worship
Church.
at night. So yeah, the Lateran Church is the actual official church of Rome, the where the bishop is and all that. Saint Peter's Basilica at this point is it's still the largest church, but it's not the official home church.
But the
If you
kindred love
follow.
it, as
Yeah.
particularly Lanciac Sanctum.
Yes, the Lancia often go there for oaths of loyalty, and you know
This is where you
they
go.
use it kind of as their sanctuary.
Also, it's also one of the best entrances to the necropolis.
Yeah, everybody knows about it, and it's a very easy way to get there. It's just that you also have to either know the Lancia to get in, or owe them a favor.
Or you have to endure them preaching at you as they scream that you must give them the gift so that no more may know. The gift being
Yeah,
plague, because you're dealing with a crazy Morbus.
it's Morbin time.
It's Morbin time. As he morbed all over the aqueduct, giving everyone dysentery.
Yeah. But then we get into the actual necropolis, which is
Here it is, and it doesn't cover
it's
the whole
actually
city.
pretty sizable. This
It's
is the underground city of the Kindred that has been hollowed out over the last few centuries underneath Rome itself. There's a lot of stuff where even now in the modern Knights of Rome, there's still elements of the necropolis still in play. If you want to run a chronicle in the city of Rome for
you can use
whatever
some of
reason,
it.
you can use a lot of this book's necropolis for these are the old relics of kindred from millennia ago.
I just
Also,
had
it's
an
not
idea.
oh,
I had an idea. What if it's modern nights and they stumble across a vampire that was in torpor from this time period?
oh, they're dead. They're fucking dead if it wakes up.
Not necessarily. Blood potency would go down pretty
Oh yeah, it
fast
would
there.
thin. Yeah.
Their disciplines would still be high, but their blood potency would be low enough that you'd have at least a shot of running away.
And imagine if this guy was a pagan. He comes out, he's
Oh,
just like,
he'd be like, "What the fuck?"
No, I got something more worse. So you're exploring the catacombs, and then you accidentally stumble because this is only the catacombs that are recognized, right? The necropolis recognized. Remember, Brother Worms expand more than this.
Oh no, you ran into a bunch of very feral Nosferatu
A horde
that
of
want
them.
to eat you.
Yeah, and some of them have been alive longer than Rome's been.
Yeah.
Or the worst case scenario, you open an area of it and owls, nothing but owls. You accidentally
The
awaken
worst.
several Strix hiding in the fucking necropolis. You could. That could actually happen, and you'd be screwed. So yeah, there's a bunch of them. There's the Alla Nigra, the Black Chamber. It's decorated as described by Cassius Dio. Some kindred believe the actual chamber is used by Domitian because, well, it's Domitian. Domitian had the infamous Black Feast.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah. Some
we talked
kindred
about
believe
him.
that this is Some kindred believe this is the actual, used by Domitian, but
Probably not.
Probably not. It's managed by Marcus Aurelius Niger, an elderly kindred who's embraced in his early teens. He claims to have been one of the slave boys at the original dinner party, and that might be true. Uh, in any case, he maintains the fittings of the room, a bunch of people to serve and supply necessary goods, and makes them available to any kindred willing to meet his price. For respectable ones, this is a quite reasonable and generally minor favor. Uh, Outcasts even can use it, but you're going to need to pay more. It's used almost exclusively for meetings with mortals, and the point of it is to impress on them that this is so fucking weird, and you are dealing with something.
Essentially, it's to play up the pageantry, because remember, the Romans still, even not necessarily Christians, but the Romans are familiar with the concept of the wandering spirits still. This is to
Yeah,
really get them into that mindset. So if you need
yeah,
an official full meeting, this is where you go.
right. And you can also, of course, expect complete discretion from Niger. For whatever reason, he somehow has figured out a way to protect himself from interrogation rituals and whatever else. The room is often used when they want to be able to produce witnesses to a dealings with the mortal, but not have it spread around too early.
So here are some cursed elements to this. So here's a few things. This is also where ghoul, if you're making ghouls, this is where you traditionally do it to really build up the pageantry.
Yep.
It can be done casually, but this is where if you really want to make it like official and ceremonial. On top
Right.
of that, there's rumors that besides staving off the killer devil owls, Niger's actually researching ways to undo the vampirism. Solely because he might actually want to become a full-grown man.
Yeah. There's speculation that he is a powerful necromancer of some sort, and seeking a way to return to mortality so he can finally become an adult. Now, I love the fact that the equipment bonus for this is a +5, which is the maximum you can get in the that. That's another 5 dice to just intimidate mortals.
Because remember, this room and this entire area is patterned off of Domitian's feast.
Yeah.
And even if and it's very likely that the guy running it was there. So it is exactly the same fucking feast.
Remind me again what that feast was?
Okay, so everything was painted black. Everyone was expected to wear black. The food was all done pitch black. They were surrounded by essentially headstones, and on top of that, Domitian was reading lists that looked exactly like the prescription lists that were used to execute people.
And everyone who was there was on that list, I'm presuming?
Yes.
They died?
No, because it was a fake version of the prescription list. He was doing it to terrify them. Like, he kept making little comments about, like, things they might have done, too. Just to really show, yeah, I could kill you right now. And he acted very friendly. And that's the thing with Domitian. He would do that. He actually did kill people in that exact same way. He was very unpredictable in when he would do it. Just because he was chummy with you didn't mean that he wouldn't just order a guard to drag you away or just fucking crucify you on the spot.
Yeah.
It was all pitch black. It was surrounded by essentially like fucking funeral decorations, like skull. It was like the biggest goth fucking meal ever.
Yeah, it was a huge goth shindig.
Everything was pitch black. I think that weren't the servant boys like dressed to look like ghosts?
Yes, they were. They're also painted black.
Yeah. Everything was black. Now imagine that, but done by vampires and done in a stage that's even more creepy because they have supernatural powers to really sell the mood.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's a reason why if you need to officially communicate, like if you're tapped to communicate with like someone official in the Roman government, this is where
you fucking bring them to impress on the fact that you do not talk about anything that happens here ever.
Mainly because yeah, you're talking with ghosts, man.
Yeah.
The Fons Atter, the Black Spring. It's a natural cave under the Esquiline Hill. No light may be taken in here because it's the favorite site for black magic. They're natural, but the entrance is sealed with 2 bronze doors. It is said anyone who takes a light into the Fawn's Atzer will be struck down by the gods.
Well, that's because it's
Partially true.
yeah, because it's an oil well.
Yeah? Yeah, it's an oil well.
And they've somebody figured out what it was and what would happen, and did something incredibly clever, and designed a self-sealing door for it,
Yeah.
where
It
if
basically, as
it
the
does
fire
catch on
sucked
fire,
in air, as it burned, it would slam shut and starve it of air. And then once it burned out, you can reopen it again. Also, this is the place where if you wanted to commit horrible blood magic or sorcery, this is where you go.
this is 100% where you go. Yes.
Also, you kind of need Auspex because you're not going to be able to see shit without
You
it.
really can't see shit. Yeah, no. The floor is uneven. There's a lot of niches where they put lead curse tablets. This is a part of Roman culture and folk magic that continued basically into like the 1800s. Was a the tradition of to curse someone, you carve their name and what you want to happen to them in a lead tablet and you bury it.
Yep, and there's a bunch of those.
Yeah. There's well, if the best way to use this is to use it as a sorcery thing. And some curses can only be undone with the tablet describing them as removed, which would require you to get there. Finding it is the first step, and also the Camarilla really does not like this place a lot because it's
Basically,
well,
any hedge wizard or fucking ghoul or anyone practicing magics, yeah.
yeah, they're a danger, including other kindred magicians, like, the augurs. So being able to shut them down from using this would actually be a very big boon for everyone else.
The problem is it's a bitch and a half to shut down.
Yes.
Too much influence from the augurs and others.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Also, if you bring an open flame in here, you just take 20 points of aggravated damage.
And die instantly.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
And all of the curse tablets melt. So it's a valid way to get rid of those curse tablets that might be trying to.
So
to
yeah, if
nuke
you're
you.
required to do that, like because you were cursed, you could, if you're a big asshole, you could send a ghoul down there on a suicide run.
Yeah.
Just expect everyone to hate you after that.
Right. So the Camarilla is the actual chamber where they meet, as mentioned before. This is the small room carved out of the
Roman
Trepian rock.
politicians being crazy, who would have guessed? I know, it's surprising.
Yeah. There's a whole thing where this is first, used after the defeat of the Nemesis. It was apparently the site of the final battle between Senex and and Remus and the Striges, but well, who knows? It is
None of
carved
them
directly from.
are aware of how this was built. Some think
Yeah,
it was
it's
built by Senex himself early on under Remus's order. Yeah, no one knows.
yeah. In any case, it's carved from the rock of the hill. It's angular, about 25 feet long by 10 feet wide. They're carved with niches flanked by columns.
And unlike most, and this is actually sculpted in high quality ways. Like there's
Yes.
Doric columns. It's done in the traditional Roman style.
There is the chair, of course, for the Senex, which is never sat in, because that is where Senex is supposed to sit.
Actually, the best way to describe this room is there's actually this really cool church in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
That was actually carved from one rock. Basically, they dug into the earth this kind of big regolith, and it's all sculpted from one piece. No stone. It is just one big rock, and that's kind of how this room is.
That is 100% what this room is. Yes.
Oh, also, any vampire dares to sit in it is cursed, and it is like straight up. You're fucked. No one knows if it's the chair that's doing it, but if it isn't, the augurs sure as shit will make sure you're cursed. Because yeah, you're violating a very key element of Camarilla there, buddy. That's Senex's chair. You don't sit in it.
Yeah. The 6 remaining niches are also carved with stone chairs. There's originally maybe a haven at some point. The thing is that there is an altar with an inscription which has been hacked away. There's a few things of maybe what it could be, but nobody really knows for sure.
It might have been
And
maybe where the original version of the Senex, like the actual meeting guys were, but no one knows
yeah,
anymore.
and in any case, now there's with the Synexes in session, uh, not everybody can actually fit in there anymore.
Yeah,
Only
this used to
vampires
be
actually.
where they were.
Yeah, only vampires who are actually within the Camarilla are allowed to speak with the Senex to be heard, but any vampire there may speak and it may not be attacked as physically as long as the Senex is in session. There's no longer term immunity from retribution, however, and a number of impudent negates have been torn to pieces in the corridors after being dragged from the Camarilla itself.
Oh,
It is open at all times. All kindred are allowed to go in there. But most of the time, the Camarilla is in fact empty because it's generally, well, if it's not in session, why go there?
are actually within the camera are allowed to speak and heard, but vampires here maybe speak and now be attacked physically as long as in session. If you're dumb enough to speak up, they'll let you, and then as soon as it's over, dead.
Yeah,
Which is actually what happens to the Lengthy Ex Sanctum, by the way.
yeah.
Debates are central to kindred society and play an important role in many chronicles. So, this is basically where this is the book telling you, hey, storytellers, this is where your politics expositions come from.
Yeah. And then we get this wonderful place called the Porta Noctis.
The Door of Night.
Yes, this is where the Camarilla traditionally bring a person to come in to be embraced.
Walls are clad in marble. The ceiling is plastered and decorated with a fresco showing an evening sky. Oh wow, they put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, the floor is covered with black and white geometric mosaic, probably dating from the 1st century. In the
Also,
center of
in
the
the
room
center of the
is a
room,
barred black marble sarcophagus with no lid. Carvings on the side depict important incidents from the early history of the Camarilla, the transformation of Remus, the embrace of Senex, and the overthrow of the Tritadores. A final short side also shows a male vampire emerging from a cave tomb that was sealed by a large rock as Roman soldiers run away. The sarcophagus is more than 500 years old, and no one admits to knowing what the final image was originally supposed to represent. Likely supposed to represent Remus or Senex himself, but of course, Jesus as a vampire.
Also, on top of that, there is I forget the term for when you carve over a relief with a new relief, but they did that with the purging of the Traditores.
That's true, they did.
I forget the term for it, but it's basic. I think it's like contra inscribing or something. Basically, when you detail structures, you can edit over them, but you can tell because it's going to be deeper.
Yeah. In any case, a large gilded canopy stands above the sarcophagus, supported on 4 columns that rest on the floor. 4 manacles are fastened to bars along the sides, 2 for the wrists and 2 for the feet. New vampires are typically starving when they first awaken, and a human is normally fastened to these manacles face down to provide a first meal.
Yep.
Sires make their own decisions about whom to put here. Some sires sacrifice random slaves or people picked off the street. Others, in a bit of morbid humor, have 2 regular people competing to be embraced. The loser is the one that ends up being the meal for the winner.
Or if they're really a big asshole, they pick someone who might have been a keystone for them.
Oh, yes.
They're a really big asshole.
Oh, this is one of the few areas of the necropolis that mortals may enter. It is an absolute rule that no one may leave alive. Not all kindred are embraced in this room, of course. There's a custom, though it has not been strictly enforced, that those who are not should at least spend 1 night in the sarcophagus and feed from a vessel restrained above them before being officially welcomed. The Lancia at Sanctum has completely rejected this, obviously.
Mainly because it's a inhibition, and if you're wondering why they do this, here's something that I kind of picked up on. It's not implied, but it's something that makes a lot of sense. This is so vampires can count how many members in each faction there are, because it's an official event.
Yeah, this
is their way to census, essentially, how many vampires there are.
Yeah, that's part of the way is officially this is done so, Well, unofficially, that probably is part of the reason why it's done this way, so
Although
you
it's
can
not
keep
working
track of how
anymore
many of the.
because, I mean,
Because the Lanciate Sanctum is just like, fuck no, you got
well,
to
you
go
also
away.
forget Brother Worms do it too. They're also
Yeah,
ignoring it.
mind you, nobody keeps track of the Nosferatu. This is for proper
This is
kindred,
for
which would be the
normal
Julii.
vampires.
This
Why,
this would be for like
why,
the
why do
Julii.
we keep hearing people digging in the night?
Yeah.
Where'd this tunnel come from? Oh no! Gets eaten alive by
Yeah,
a
the
Nosferatu.
lictors are in fact volunteers, and there's often only one present. There's nothing valuable in the chamber most of the time, so the guard is basically just ceremonial. A good way is actually,
Service is a great way to earn a favor,
yeah,
even if
uh,
literally nothing fucking happens.
yeah. Just as the poor of Rome are sustained by the bread dole, so the poor of the necropolis sustained by a blood dole.
Because it's Rome, of course they'd do it.
Yeah, so this is a fun part of this book, and I quite like this concept. Also, I quite like how it kind of works out.
It's a big tunnel with a lot of small rooms. They contain manacles in which mortals are restrained because they have a human trafficking system.
Yes, they do.
And the kindred who are entitled to a portion of the dole, essentially those who suck too much at hunting or just don't have the permits to hunt in that area, because that is a thing. Hunting grounds are divvied up traditionally by the Camarilla. If your area is too small, this is where you can get the permission to do this.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, it's not a big area. It is mainly just a supplement.
Right. It's usually only once a month. There's some months which happens in once a week, which could actually allow you to survive. This is more of like you've had a bad night.
You have a bad night, and you have essentially the equivalent of that metal tablet, which states up front your hunting grounds are pretty damn small. Like basically, the way vampires, even in this era, you do have your hunting grounds, and if it's small, you probably can get the equivalent of the blood dole, yeah, of the corn dole here, just
Mind
because
you,
you
only
don't have
once a
the
month.
output. Yeah, it's not really enough to prevent you from going nuts because they're vampires. They don't actually fucking care until you cause
Yeah.
trouble.
I'm wondering with these systems if there's a way for like a Diablerist to
Exploit
sneak over.
this? They mention that actually here. Well, not a Diablerist necessarily, but they mention where there could be some issues here. So
Attending the dole is an acknowledgement of lowly social. Oh, they don't do the. I thought they might have copied. No, you come here if you've had a bad night and they want and you're okay with being mocked or seen
yeah,
as lower.
this is a thing where it's like
It's not like the
I
Roman
can't really hunt
ones.
for myself right now. Yeah, this is not like, oh, we give it to everyone because of all this. This is the I can't hunt because I am fucked up, or I'm a new vampire, or whatever other reason. I go here because there's at least going to be a meal for a night.
So I had it wrong. So in this one, no, it's basically the way the blood dole works. Okay, so it's very different from the corn dole. Corn dole is an official government system that is made to make sure that the poor, at minimum, can have one meal a day. Something like the equivalent of that. This is different. This is basically the equivalent of the asshole flexing like, look, I have so many resources, I can get my slaves or my stupid idiots to come down here, and you fuckers, you lowly peons who can't hunt because you suck, you can come here and drink.
Yeah, it's a traditional way
Basically,
for powerful vampires to
just
assert their
flex.
influence.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just to
it's
flex.
flexing.
So that's why it's usually monthly because I mean, people disappearing do get looked at eventually, even in Rome. And on top of that, let's be fair, most vampires aren't that fucking influential. They have good ties, but not to the point where they can just do this regularly. So yeah. No, by the way, it's a bit different if it's a powerful vampire doing this as a charity. I'm putting that in so many fucking quotes, it's not even funny.
Yeah,
It's
because
different if
again, if you don't go, it can be seen as being very arrogant. Uh, Kindred attending merely out of courtesy might just, oh, I bite someone. Oh, okay, now I'm done.
So I had it wrong. I thought it was similar to the corn dole because sometimes you have to do this thing with books called reading them.
Yes.
That's kind of
So
important.
so
But
then
yeah,
they
the
also
blood dole is
mentioned that
kind of just more of a thing,
yeah, again, it's mostly the
a
most
flex.
important thing is that if you're hurt and you can't feed very effectively, if you're lucky enough to wait for the corn dole, well, not the corn dole, the blood dole to come around, you can then you can drain maybe a person dry and use that blood to heal yourself up to be able to hunt again. Very useful. Originally, the blood was drained from mortals and put in cups. This was ended because someone tried to put everyone else under blood bonds.
Which is a thing that still exists in New World. The vinculum is still a thing.
Yes, this does not mean, however, that this change has not stopped vampires from trying to figure out ways to exploit this to their benefit. Of course,
For example, here's a shitty way you could do it. You take the equivalent of a rusty heroin needle and you jam a bit of your vitae into the mortal before they get blood doled.
maybe that'll work. Maybe it won't. Storytellers, come up with that answer on your own.
But yeah, traditionally blood doles are used by slaves. Traditionally,
Though
sometimes
sometimes you get some very extravagant ones where it's like the example of the extremely refined taste.
basically
Like, oh, it's a bunch of mortals of noble sons that have been brought into the
for the big event. Here's the thing though. Unlike the corn dole where if it's interrupted because a lot of Romans may not actually be able to like it's the equivalent of one guaranteed meal, which in the ancient world that is very important. That's very important for the ancient world. It still is in a good portion of the world today. Not having that guarantee will cause a riot in Rome. For the necropolis, blood doles aren't as important. And the only time it can cause riots, but it's traditionally only if it's been promised and then the guy welches.
yeah.
That's the only time a blood dole riot usually happens. And even then, that's not all the time. Oh, and there's also the matter that yeah, it's kind of expected most of the people in the blood dole will die, but in certain cases if they're extravagant like that,
There might be one or two people that survive. At which
or
point,
if they're important sons, like if you did that, like here's my event where I get a bunch of senators' kids for this. Yeah,
what do you do?
you can't probably get rid of those. With slaves, it's a lot more doable. Like who gives a shit? By the way, hunting is automatically successful here if there's a blood dole. That's why a blood dole exists. Just don't expect it to happen often, otherwise people ask. And there's the Temple of Remus. It's the holiest place in the necropolis. And this is the main place of importance for the augurs. Now, here's the thing. They don't necessarily know if the name indicates that Remus built the temple, or if it was built in his honor since he is gone. It is deep under the Capitoline Hill. Its position and orientation allegedly corresponds exactly to the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, which was the most important temple of Rome back in the day.
Also, supposedly where Remus ended up embraced.
It consists of 3 chambers, and though the space in the rock is ancient, the fittings, including the stones, have been changed quite a bit. Most recently, over a century ago. And it's pretty much a lot of effort and love was put into this because, well, he founded the fucking Camarilla. Essentially.
Yeah.
Also, there's a beautiful mosaic of the night sky. The sky depicted matches essentially the time of Remus's embrace. The night sky matches perfectly to the date that is commonly believed by vampire kind that Remus was touched by the owls.
Yeah, there's a few other statues in here, and it's a very interesting place in terms of you can use this as basically I want to talk to the augurs. Well, this is where the augurs are, and everybody knows that this is where they are.
And this is where if you're a pagan, you make sacrifices to the gods you followed in life.
Yeah, because they have statues here and other things like that. Like, it's also been rebuilt a few times and expanded and all that over the centuries. And there is at least one other chamber in the temple, though nobody really outside of the Order of Augurs knows what it actually is. It might be a back room with a special altar, or one of the rumors is that this is actually where Remus or Senex himself is currently sleeping.
Yep. One of the temple statues is actually, no one's really sure what it's supposed to represent. It's the oldest one, and it is thought to either be the personification of night, which is a bit weird because Nyx is traditionally seen as female,
Yeah,
but it's more commonly thought that could actually be a statue of Remus himself.
right.
Now, for story use, yeah, this is where you consult the augurs. Or if your
Basically.
character, or if your player character is an augur, you might actually be here for some basic temple duties because that's how temples work.
Also, this whole place is, for whatever reason, also supernatural in and of itself, especially when sacrificing at the altar. So it is very possible for you to get into some fucking weird vision quest bullshit here.
Yeah.
Nobody
The
knows
atrium
why.
gives +1 to all augur rituals. The main cella, which are the statue areas, gives you -3. This only applies though if it's been authorized.
Yeah, if it's not an authorized ritual, you don't get any bonuses.
No, you get a penalty actually.
Yeah, which is pretty neat. I like it a lot.
And here are some generic locations that you might run into. This is just to give the storyteller ideas.
Yeah. So first off, baths.
There's over 500 of them in Rome. Caracalla's is merely the biggest and most impressive because hey, it's not uncommon for baths to be heated and warmed by slaves. A lot of bathhouses have them. Caracalla though has the cold baths, warm baths, and hot baths. It has the space for it. Most of them
Yeah,
are closer to just tepidariums, although you have frigidariums for those who are more risky, or the occasional hot tubs, although those are more for the rich.
yeah. In any case,
We
bathhouses
covered them
are,
before.
yeah.
Basically, this is where they socialize. This is
They
where you
usually,
talk.
yeah, they usually have a location for exercise as well. The smallest usually can only hold down to 6 people at a time. Some are single sex only. Others have,
Co-op.
yeah, most are not. Most
Most
are
are single.
co-ed.
Yeah.
Most aren't single. Most
Most are
are,
co-ed. Yeah.
yeah. And again, if you're looking to hunt, a bath is actually a very good place to go. Because small baths where there might be only 2 or 3 patrons, very easy to go in and nibble on somebody.
So yeah, basically, no, all baths are similar to Caracalla. They usually have the 3. There again, Tepidarium is the warm, pleasant, like you just relax there. Caldarium is more like a sauna. This is where you sweat, and the Frigidarium is to refresh themselves.
Yeah. I do like to note that no, the Kindred don't control the bathhouses.
No, they don't. Baths of Caracalla aren't even fully controlled by the lady that we brought up, the
Yeah,
member of the Senate.
she's just able to swing, keeping them open later at night, and a few other things.
And she also happens to know, I forget the name of the guy. Basically, the one of the higher tier soldiers.
The urban prefect.
Yeah, the urban prefect who basically it allows her to do that.
Yeah.
Baths, yeah, this is where you hunt. Violence does occasionally break out in the bathhouses. So
yeah.
if you need to ice a bitch, you can do this here. You have to be careful about that.
Yeah, some bathhouses have gladiatorial weapons because they're gymnasiums and shit as well.
Gymnasiums are nearby-ish, yeah.
Also, the furnaces at most of these bathhouses deal 5 aggravated damage per turn to vampires thrown inside them.
Or alternatively, this is not a bad way to dispose of a body as well. Caracalla is better though, because
Yeah, Caracals are bigger, so they're a little bit better for that. Next up, of course, is brothels.
Because of
Rome
course.
has a lot of them.
Oh, also, yeah, they're all dressed, thankfully. Also,
Yeah.
note disturbingly, Rome has a belief
Yeah,
about that. Let's not go into
Rome
that.
has a lot of that. Let's not go into that. So brothels, of course, don't always house the best whores. You know, there's various clientele and various other things going on with them. The best ones, of course, are really truly elegant, and you know, they don't put price tags on the merchandise. Though this may be more to keep people from having heart attacks on seeing what the whore is going to cost for the night.
Yep. So here's some things. They vary in quality, vary in type. Some have specialize in specific clients. Some might specialize in just specific types. Not all prostitutes are slave. Ones that are paid are usually much more willing. There are free prostitutes, and yeah, their life is horrifying.
Oh,
Yeah,
It is slightly better than working to death in the mines, though.
it is. You at least get fucked.
So yeah, there are free prostitutes. It's horrific.
It's not very good. Yeah, most of the time it's through brothels. The
If you're wondering, a high quality hooker, they traditionally are not here.
yeah.
Usually, what
Uh,
happens is they become courtesans.
Right. Now, there's more than a few brothels that Kindred own to be used for intelligence gathering. And it's also, of course, a good place to hunt because if you pay someone and you just feed from them, well, it's not like, they can really object to it.
And on top of that, let's be fair, they've probably dealt with weirder.
Yeah, someone that just bites them and then they just come buckets. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good night. Because vampire bites can do that to people. In World of Darkness, they're also actually addictive.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
the sensation of being fed on is incredibly pleasurable.
so yeah, if you're wondering, this is a pretty cheap way to get fed. This is also not a bad. If you're going to set up your own little spy agencies, this is also not a bad place to put one.
Not at all.
Oh,
There's a few.
Capone. These are the tab or similar to tabernas. These are your drinking establishments.
Right.
And I
They.
forgot to turn off Steam. God damn it. 1 second. I could have swore I killed Steam.
I mean, we might take a break for a second here to see what chat is, and chat has not really.
Don't mind me. I'm just killing it. I don't like. It's just sometimes it happens. I almost killed Discord. That would have been funny. I almost killed the Streamlab. That would have been funny.
Yeah, chat's dead right now, which I'm disappointed by. But hey, hello, people. We love you.
There we go. I yeeted Steam. By the way, thanks for showing up, Squirrel Killer, and thank for the comment, great and spooky. I keep
Yeah,
attention.
we do pay attention to chat.
I bring it up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we're back. Again, it's not a big deal. It's just I'm surprised Steam activated when I like it just was in the background.
But yeah, the Capone are of course relatively common, and regulars are very common too for areas. They're usually open all night. They
Oh,
usually
yeah, they
have
mentioned the insulae, which I think is another form of establishment.
insulae are housing
Just nothing.
block
Oh, from Scroll
basically.
Killer, there's just nothing to comment on when it comes to bads and horror. Yeah, we kind of covered that.
Yeah. The thing with Capone is kind of like that. This is like the hole in the wall bar that you would have in almost every other setting. And of Great and Spooky, of course,
and they're hole in walls. They usually only can
they
hold
are.
about 6 or
They're
7
often
people.
in housing complexes. They're often pretty small. They often, of course, have a counter with, the bartender on one side, everything else on the other. Patrons usually don't always know each other, but they generally will know the bartender pretty well.
On top of that, they're very insular.
Yeah, if you're trying to get information here and you're not a regular, good fucking luck.
And the thing is, the main drink of choice is wine. Watered wine, specifically.
Yeah, you water that shit down because Roman wine and actually really almost all the wine of the ancient world was more akin to what we would call
Poison?
brandy today. It was very high alcohol content compared to what we consider the standard alcohol content of modern wine. So it was usually watered down.
So the way a capona works is there's the small counter, the patrons sit on one side, and the calpo, which is your bartender, on the other. And yeah, they just tend to just be people who drink. It doesn't matter who.
Yeah.
Now who's in there? It depends. You can run into a gladiator here, or members of a secret religious cult.
Why not? Larger capone oftentimes do advertise their presence as drinking establishments and act more like taverns would today,
Yeah, capone are
or
basically
bars.
little small essentially micro bars. Like they only seat like maybe 6 to 10 people. Larger capone or more or taberna, if you want to use that term. Yeah, they're like actual modern bars today, where they usually have a couple dozen to maybe even up to 4 or 5 dozen seating arrangements.
Yeah, they also mentioned that they're great sources of information if you're a regular. They're also a great place to hire muscle if you're a regular.
They're also an amazing place, the larger ones, to if you're the vampire that commits fraud.
Yes.
This is where you
If you're
commit your fraud.
we're committing tax evasion.
Well, no,
Uh,
you're stealing people's wages.
yeah. Uh, well, you're also not paying any taxes.
Like
You're a
meat and
vampire.
beer is weak as fuck compared to modern standards. Yeah,
Yeah. Older beer is actually pretty weak compared to modern stuff, but wine was kind of the other way around until you watered it down.
I'm just now reminded of that it's not even related. I think I brought it up where there was a type of alcohol that was so essentially potent that Queen Elizabeth fucking banned it.
Is
Elizabeth
that
the First.
absinthe?
No, it's the there. You know how there's the X standard for how much alcohol
Oh,
content.
right. Yeah, yeah,
There
yeah, yeah.
used
The
to be a
triple X stuff.
quadruple.
Yeah.
No, not triple. There used to be a quadruple X type.
Really?
Queen Lizzie banned it.
That
The
shit
Virgin
must have
Queen
been
banned it.
basically. That must have been fucking Everclear, basically.
It was. To give you an idea, here's the thing though. It's not because she was like a Puritan on that sort of stuff. No. No, 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 no. Alcohol is. She was known to drink like a fucking fish. It's just that was considered way too boozy even for her.
Yeah, too boozy even for Elizabethan England is a fucking accomplishment.
Hey Shane,
Uh,
the wine could get so strong you could set it on fire, which by the way could be used to mess with low. Oh yeah, fire in general scares all vampires.
yes, it does. In terms of this, the other things you could use for this is that they are actually pretty decent meeting points for vampires. Because if you don't trust another vampire with where you're sleeping, saying we're gonna meet here at this hole in the wall is a pretty good way to do a meeting because the bartender is probably not going to care too much, and you can, if you're a vampire, you might be able to just wipe his memory and say he never even remembers you two walking in.
Yeah, I mean it's just where you do clandestine meetings. Lizzie was a fucking drunken bitch. She was. She definitely
Yes,
was. Churches, with the public acceptance of
churches.
Christianity. Yeah, churches have now been official. Originally, churches were more secret,
Yeah,
often
and
disguised as either residential buildings or occasionally disguised as a temple to another god, or often just underground. They built in the
yeah,
fucking sewers and
uh,
catacombs.
yeah. So now though they're all able to be above ground, which means that they're a little bit weirder now, and they're often all new construction.
Yep,
They're also usually cut into the hillside, or
because
they
they
have a
were
floor
often
that is
built
several
around the
feet
tombs of.
underground.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they were often built under the tombs of martyrs.
they're kind of well funded right now. At least there's a few that there's a few that have kind of an interesting histories of like this is literally a tomb that we built a church around. There's
A
others that
lot of
are
them were,
literally
yeah.
yeah, others that are just we have a location, we're just building a church.
And
Uh,
sometimes building obstacles meant that you get like this Basilica of St. Paul, which is another one. It's
yeah,
a
that we
tiny
mentioned that
fucking.
earlier.
It's a tiny.
It's
No, no,
pretty
no,
small.
no, no, not Peter. This is Paul's, which is a
Oh,
different one.
Paul.
Paul's
Ooh.
is even smaller. It's like a fucking shack. It is a tiny shack, and the reason why is because of building codes. It's surrounded by other buildings, so it can't be much bigger than just a small building on top of the tomb.
That is genuinely.
Like imagine going to a shed. It's not maybe that small, but it is puny.
Yeah.
Most of these churches were actually given funding from Constantine and his successors,
Yes.
so they're
Again, as
actually pretty
mentioned,
nice looking.
they're relatively nice looking, and they're also all new construction, which
And some of them were built on top of old temples.
right.
So you might see like a graffitied version of Dionysus, like disguised as, I don't know, John the Baptist.
Yeah. There has to be somebody in the Bible that was ripped apart by wild nymphs or whatever the fuck. You know.
You just randomly like, oh, that's not a statue of Juno. That's the Virgin Mary. We just graffitied on her to not look like Juno.
This was more common than you'd think.
This happened a lot.
Yeah.
The tomb itself, basically the tomb in most churches, because most of them were built on tombs of martyrs. Yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Roman religious conversions, wild. Oh yeah. The most significant feature of all churches is the martyr who's honored there. Yeah, early churches traditionally named themselves after people who died,
Yeah.
and were often built on
and if
top
they
of their
didn't,
tomb.
yeah, and if they didn't have a person that died, they just made them the fuck up.
Oh yeah, there's some invented martyrs.
There's some
There's a
pretty
couple
famous
dozen
invented ones. Yeah.
And another thing they would do is they would like show how they died in these amazing frescoes, and it's like almost fucking cartoonish sometimes.
Yeah, because some of them were the ones we're pretty sure were invented are very creative in how they died. Namely that they had to be died in, of course, in an insanely gruesome and horrible way.
Oh
Because they
yeah,
have to have
Saint Bartholomeus. He was turned inside out and cooked alive in the brass bull, and he crawled out looking like a burned tumor, asking for more heat.
Yeah,
Like
so
that
totally a
level of
saint. Totally,
ridiculous.
yeah, totally. We haven't just made up a martyr because we wanted to build a new church.
Like a more realistic example was, oh yeah, this martyr refused to pay taxes until Christians weren't persecuted anymore, and he was thrown to the beasts. That would
Yeah.
probably happen. But the guy who like was flayed alive and walked around without a skin probably didn't.
Probably not. Yeah.
Because hey, that's actually more of a like an Eastern.
The church. Yeah, the church
Syrian
actually has a lot of. Has basically said like we really don't know with a lot of these early martyrs. They're basically saints traditionally.
I'm
not a lot
just
of evidence
envisioning
for
the
'em.
Church of Saint Dismas, the thief who was crucified next to Jesus, and like it's like, look, we even have his head.
We have the head
Is
of
that guy a
Dismas.
saint?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's an officially a saint of the Catholic
They
Church. Yes.
invented his life completely from whole cloth.
Yep, we don't even. Dismas was probably not even his name.
It wasn't. It wasn't at all. He was he was a petty thief who, based on conversations in the Gospels, actually kind of felt bad about what he did. And Jesus was like, don't worry, bro.
Don't worry,
your
you're coming to heaven with me. It's fine.
Your remorse at doing this means that you're probably gumming up with me.
Yeah.
That's
It's
the only
okay.
thing that allegedly, like with some minor element of truth, happened. Everything else was made up.
It's a lot like Saint Longinus, where it's like a lot of the shit about him is also like completely apocrypha.
There's a church by me. The story is his name for the first the people who worked on it to die. He got kicked by a bull.
Oh wow, that's actually rad.
That does sound like a saint death. I could totally see it.
That sounds like a I can see someone saying that yes, that the bull was a tool of Satan and he was struck down.
I'm just now envisioning. I kind of wish that like this happened during Christian times, because I want a patron saint who did a double backflip into a volcano to join Jesus, like that one philosopher. He did that to prove divinity. He did a backflip into a fucking volcano just to be like, I'm with the gods now, bitch.
I'm a magical man. Watch me go.
I'm just envisioning a martyr who does that, and it's
There were
hilarious.
there were a couple that did stupid shit like that.
Like, no, Roman
Didn't it-
Emperor, don't crucify me. Allow me to double backflip into Mount Vesuvius. Like, into the
Uh,
active volcanic crater.
my
Didn't the
personal
early-
favorite weird saint thing is the pickled children that Saint Nicholas brought back.
Oh, yeah, he did that.
Yeah, which is the stupidest story of being a saint I've ever really freaking heard is the pickled children, where it's like, first off, what the fuck? You
Second
know?
off, what the fuck?
Who pickles children?
Someone who kills children to sell their meat.
Which is what St. Nicholas stopped.
Yes.
You
This
know,
is
in
part of
between
why
beating a guy to death in an argument.
yeah, between beating people to death for not believing in the right form of Christianity.
He also punched out child like the witch from Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, and through money to someone so that they wouldn't become a prostitute. This is why Saint Nicholas is the patron saint of Christmas now, because because of pickled children and throwing money down chimneys.
I'm just. I mean, it could have been funnier. He could have went to the brothels and just as they went to the bedroom, he just threw the bag of money at their face, screaming, "Stop
There's
being
a couple
a
of
whore!"
saints I think that did that. Actually did that. Yes.
Just throw money,
Uh,
throw money at their. Stop being a whore.
Yes, there's more than one or two that did that. There was one that was then killed by a pimp, and that's how he became a martyr.
Honestly, steal the idea of Saint BSing to justify temples in your fantasy setting. It's funny and lets you have a fun story. Yeah, Squirrel Killer, that's fun. Like, oh yeah, this temple was founded because the priest essentially tried to prove his faith to Pelor by saying that his grace guides him through the greatest of heat. So he did a triple backflip into the lava. He allegedly lived until every part of his body was covered by lava, and then he instantly died. Which is an actual mechanic, by the way. If you get instantly covered in lava in 3.5, like completely, I think you just die instantly.
3.5, the worst system. 3.5 from a game design perspective, the more you look back at it, the more you're like, this is some fucking bullshit, man.
It gets kind of better with new anyway. So yeah, churches of Rome are built for socializing. Even pagan kindred often use churches as ways to pass around because they often have access to the necropolis. All of them.
Because a lot of them are, again, built over tombs that were used by the Lancia Sanctum as havens.
And they kind of control a lot of the easy entranceways, so they get a lot of flack.
Yep.
On top of that, you can't really hunt there because the Lancians like, no, they're praying. Fuck you.
Holy ground.
Well, no, it's just they're praying. Fuck you. And yeah, on top of that, Christian kindred actually are penalized if they try to fight in a church because you know.
It's your belief, and that's an impact on what you can do, because this is, it's a way to mechanically distinguish pagan and non-pagan kindred.
3.5 is the best awful system, Squirrel Killer says. Pathfinder is about 50% better. I subtly disagree, mainly because they hide the brokenness in their fiddlies.
Yeah, the next sort of bullshit that we get into is insulae. So basically,
you know the depressing apartment block hell of the Soviet Union? Yeah, the Romans invented that.
the projects, how they built like these fucking military style buildings to house poor people? That's this.
Yeah, the Romans built essentially the projects.
These are the Roman version of the projects. They're generally kind of crap.
They're kind of crap, but they have some interesting qualities. First of all, the ground floor always have shops in them of some sort.
They're basically meant to be shopping centers on the ground floor to bring in revenue.
They're the prototype mall that was invented by that one guy before corporations were like, well, let's just make it a big business place where you put only stores there.
Yeah,
Why are the malls dying? Oh no, I don't understand.
yeah.
But the ground floor were shops, sometimes owned by people in the insulae, sometimes not. Uh, the ground floor is also where the nicest accommodations are, mainly because that's the place you're less likely to die if a fire happens. Because
Yeah.
fires are common.
Fires were obscenely common in Insulae.
Because they were built
Um,
like shit.
Yep.
Also, remember, Romans embraced corruption. As long as it did not significantly impact the running of the country or the state, you can embezzle all you fucking want. And
So
a
a lot
lot
of
of
the
these
construction
insulae were
standards
built like
were not
shit.
very good.
They're built like shit. In fact, unironically, uh, if it wasn't for the fact George R.R. Martin is not a clever man when it comes to writing, King's Landing's Flea Bottom would be an awful lot like the insulae.
Yeah, there's a lot of shops around here, and the fact of the matter is that apartments open up off of the stairs that lead past it. There's like stairs between shops that lead into the actual housing area of
By the way,
these.
each apartment is usually named by the character of the shop. Oh yeah, that's the one that sells hats.
This is the Hat Insulae, yes.
And that's the one that sells fried snails covered in fish sauce.
And this is the one with all the brothels.
And this is the one that sells action figures of that one wrestler. I mean, that one gladiator.
Yeah,
Because yes, they did make toys of the
they
gladiators.
did make toys of gladiators, yes. They go on and they talk about like a lot of these are some of these are, usually they'll close after sunset aside from entertainment places. There's a few of these apartments have usually just flimsy doors.
Oh,
Uh,
and also cavernas, the little taverns. That's also very common.
yes.
There are two types of shops that are the most fucking hated.
The first one is bakeries.
Yes.
Because bakeries use open fire. Because they need to cook bread.
these are matchboxes.
Yeah, these places are not exactly what I'd call great for that.
And then laundromats, which are also a thing. Also tanners, although those are traditionally not in these.
Yeah, there's a few other kind of just weird locations, but in general, those are like the worst to have around.
Insulae do not usually have a back, and they're like
Yeah,
islands surrounded by streets. So there's shops all the way around, and stairs go up from the street between the two. Upmarket
that's what I just
Insulae,
mentioned.
yep,
Yep.
have a porter who watches the stairs and discourages suspicious characters. So if you're lucky, if you're in a less shit insulae, there's like a local street tough who's like, "Oi, get the fuck down there. Get the fuck down there."
Yeah, like who the
If you're
fuck?
lucky. If
Yeah,
you're
like
unlucky, you'll go home after watching the gladiatorial rings and you find you've been robbed completely with a note saying "Biggest Dickus was here."
yeah. Uh, Also, a lot of them have basically impromptu toilets nearby. In general, if you are a small female vampire, you're probably going to get accosted in one of these locations because, well, they're not exactly pretty.
And
These areas are generally kind of dangerous.
it's even better because their doors are like completely flimsy.
Yeah, so if you're a vampire that for whatever reason created a haven in Insulae, you're probably going to get robbed at some point.
I'm just envisioning like you find an insulae where you see like 5 dead bodies with their heads twisted backwards.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
at that point, it's a free meal.
yeah. At that point, we're doing pretty well. Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Then most people, yeah, if the person breaking down the door is scary, they usually will let you alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most apartments are 2 rooms, which is actually somewhat better than some of the apartments nowadays in the good old New York.
Yep.
An
Welcome to
insulae
high
might
occupancy. Yeah.
actually be less shit than some of the apartments
No,
you
it's
see now.
still less. No, it's still
In terms of
probably
square
better.
footage, I mean, not in terms
In
of
terms of square
quality of
footage,
life.
yeah. Pottery utensils are common, and if there's artificial light, it's
Communal
burning
shitting, which
wicks.
is pain.
Yeah.
Oh.
Baths are at the local bathhouse, wherever that is. Insulae are kind of one of those things that.
Fires are near certainty if you have lighting.
Yeah. If there's a fight, yeah, they're not exactly very safe places to be.
You're a vampire. You usually deal with the dreck and muck. So 9 times out of 10, you're gonna go to a Florida man style incident in an insulae, where the Roman equivalent of wife beaters are being worn.
Yes, the special togas.
I mean, the Roman equivalent of the Florida man. Like, you're gonna have to deal with this almost
Yeah.
certainly at some point. Either because you have agents there, or you're tapped by the Senex to do your damn job so that you're considered part of it still, or you're just doing investigation. You're gonna come to one of these pieces of shit.
There's a lot of thin walls too, like very thin walls, where they say stealth is not very easy in one of these.
Oh, and on top of that, if you're a neonate, you might actually live in one.
Though not for long, most likely, because it's a very shitty place to live.
Yeah, it's not fun. By the way, you can find improvised weapons all the time here. They're not good, but you can do stuff there.
Yeah, ceramic pottery,
I'm glad they brought up
pieces
the
of
insulae.
furniture.
I would have. I'm glad they brought that up because, like, yeah, most people forget about the insulae.
Yeah. Then there's forums. Forums are very well. They're common. There's of course the grand forums, but
this is where you meet. This is where you debate. This is where the crazy man screams about how the emperor is actually just a dog possessed by the gods or something insane like that.
or about how there's blood-sucking vampires, and you're all like, ha ha ha, that's not real. We need to kill him.
There are talking
morbing.
dogs. There are talking dogs in the woods. I speak with them, and they talk about eating people's faces.
Yeah,
The
these guys.
city's made out of metal.
The
There's
two
a
types of
metal
building
man
that are
running around.
usually found not at a forum
I found a monster turned inside out. He told me about an evil monster man that's building people out of like toys or whatever, and it's like a fucking god machine plot.
Yeah, why not? Anyway, buildings of a forum are usually include a temple. There's often shops,
This is where a lot of
bathhouses,
shops are.
brothels, all that. They're usually pretty rectangular. There's often a statue, if there is one.
Now, you're not going to find housing or churches in these areas.
Usually not, no. Churches, as noted, are around tombs of martyrs, and they're outside the formal boundaries of the city. And forums are usually well away from graveyards as well. They're busiest in the daytime, but few are completely closed at night. Shops are usually closed, but night is usually when new supplies are brought around in the streets. And deliberately planned ones are very impressive.
Yep. Traditionally, forums are still kind of busy to a degree, even at night.
Yeah.
Basic food shops are here. The stores in the forum determine kind of the character. So you could find like the local import store run by the shifty Aramaic speaking fellow.
Yeah.
Or you could find like a person who is clearly a Celtic barbarian selling like incense candles and just suspiciously bloody short knives. It's the equivalent of the open face market or bazaar. Vampires aren't real, silly. Now come with me into the tunnels, bloodbag.
Yeah.
Yeah, forums are basically where you do a lot of public meetings. You can't really talk about your Ooga Booga vampire stuff in them. You can meet with people, though. This is usually where you meet up to do your things. And this is sometimes where you kid out.
Also, sometimes where you will meet mortal agents for any various reasons.
You got to Salvinius. You have to stop eating those snails. But I love them. They're fried and covered in garum sauce. He's eaten like 5 trays of them already.
Yeah,
it's horrifying.
Then of course we get to the palaces.
Sorry, I always bring up cochlea because that's like one of the funnier recipes from ancient Rome.
Stuffed dormice is my personal favorite.
That peacock tongue as well. Like actual bird tongue is another one.
Yeah, so urban palaces look inward rather than out. The walls are usually blank to keep disturbances out in the streets.
This is where the rich people live.
Yes, the Imperial Palace right now is noted to rarely ever host the Emperor. It's still upkept, but it's not exactly what it once was.
Basically, there's also the enclosed garden. Basically, they have their own little slice of paradise, a little internal garden where they just kind of relax.
Almost all have usually at least 2 entrances, sometimes have 3, but rarely more.
There's a dining room to entertain guests. Romans actually lay down like lazy assholes rather than sit to eat.
Yep. Larger ones often have
Even more
bathhouses,
gardens, private
studies.
bathhouses, sometimes observatories.
Yeah.
Well, no, they don't have
They're
telescopes yet. Optics. I'm sorry, I had a brain fart.
Yeah, they rarely, however, are more than 1 story tall because multi-story living is for the poor.
Not only for the poor, but it's asking to get destroyed.
Yeah, it's not exactly structurally sound.
Also, palaces don't necessarily cater to the owner's tastes, because these are multi-generational things.
Yeah,
Now, decorations might be their personal taste, but the building structure, no. Also, they're usually drawing from mythology. It's pretty opulent for this time period. Sometimes they even have small family shrines.
yep. Some of them have some weird.
These are the places you break into to scare the shit out of senators.
Yeah. More than a few Roman kindred also actually maintain these as their own palaces because, for one thing, it's handy. No one's ever going to break in usually to these places, and if you're able to keep a few ghouls on staff, you can easily bring in people for night parties.
Yep. And some of
And
those palaces are abandoned because Rome is declining. So you could just be like, hey, free real estate.
break in, have fun. Of course, this also leads to the next bit about this, which is
By the
the
way, this
slave
is how
market.
the Romans eat, right here.
Yeah.
And then now we're at the slave markets because ancient Rome is a slave holding society.
A major slaveholding society.
To give you an idea on how cursed slavery is in Rome, slaves can own slaves.
Yes, they can, and they
Slaves
do.
can own slaves. And there might be even a case or two of the slaves owning slaves who also own slaves. Not very likely, but it can happen.
It's happened more than once. In any case,
If I had a denarii for every slave who owned a slave who owned a slave, I'd have 5 denarii, which isn't a lot, but it's kind of creepy that it can happen so often.
in any case, unskilled slaves are usually basically worked to death. Skilled slaves, however, are incredibly valuable, and they can sometimes find themselves running significant parts of the empire.
Yeah, here's the thing. An unskilled slave, they're usually thrown at the mines, which mining conditions to give you an idea on how crap mining conditions were, Sicily in the late 19th century kind of had a similar system in place where kids as young as, what was it, 6 or 7 were sent to the sulfur mines to crawl into crevices to dig out tiny bits, and their lungs filled with rock shards. It was described by the priests and random goers on at these locations as being portraits of hell. Mining was awful back then. Like in Sicily, mining in Rome was still somehow worse because they didn't have machinery to make it slightly easier.
Yep.
It ain't pretty. Farming ain't pretty. Farming's pretty breaking too. It wasn't
Yeah.
as bad, but you could heat stroke and die.
It's pretty labor intensive. In any case, they also mentioned that slave markets are kind of
Slavery cheaper than steam engines, and the Romans had those. Yes, they did.
yeah.
But they were treated as toys.
And in general, though, sick and dead slaves aren't going to make any money, so the accommodations for slave markets are actually sometimes better than people are living in.
Sometimes the slave markets have better bedding than the insulae. Keep that in mind.
However, they're usually kept pretty quiet because they don't like the slaves talking among themselves, because that might be where they get ideas that are dangerous, like freedom
They've
or
had 3
escape.
servile revolts after all.
Yeah. One of the things to note is that if somebody that you know is in a slave market and you need to get to them, the best way to do it is just buy them.
Oh, the Roman steam engine was pretty impractical for actual use, though. No, yeah, great and spooky. It was more of a curiosity. The Aeoliophile was just what we're talking about. it can only, I think, move for about 30 minutes. It didn't have a lot of torque, and it was seen more as a curiosity, like an interesting concept. Mostly
Yeah.
used more for like toys or to play around with music. You could hypothetically make a machine out of it, and I think Romans thought about it, but the practicalities of building something like that were just seen as not worth it. Because even the little things, those little Alia files, I think they had a couple of explosions with them, and they're like, fuck that. It just, they didn't have the economy to really make that sort of thing. But yeah, slave markets are a great way to buy blood.
Yep.
Because slaves literally, they can't object if the master kills his own slaves. I mean, it's seen as a faux pas.
Yeah. Feeding vampires can buy the cheapest slaves, though if you want some more upscale substance, why not buy it? And finally, the last thing to note is that they, of course, usually have quite a lot of guards. They usually tend to have whips and heavy shackles on hand. And if there is an escape, good fucking luck, because everyone around them is going to be chasing them down.
Yep, it's honestly easier if you want to rescue someone from a slave market, just buy them.
Yep.
It's only difficult if they're particularly valuable, so it's pretty easy. Oh, there is evidence of them trying to make it work. Yeah, but yeah, the Alia file is a toy. They did have pretty impressive gear work. I believe the Arabs were the first to really develop them further, because some of the earliest really kind of efficient water wheels and milling processes came from Syria.
Yeah.
Characters can also be sold to slavery, which they can. But here's the problem: you have to get out of the market before dawn. You're fucked otherwise.
Yeah.
Streets. The streets of Rome are distinguished from many other streets in the ancient world in two ways. Number one, they're paved, even if the
Yep.
paving's not the nicest. Second, they have sewers, which means you don't have poo. There's no poop in the streets.
There's areas of the city and during the day can be incredibly crowded. At night, it's a little bit different. First off, there's areas that are completely deserted because there's no reason to be there, like the market squares and things like that. The second is that there's other areas
There's
because
rough
it is
areas of
incredible.
town.
Yeah, it is very dangerous to be. Other areas are very, very busy because, well, you're
Capone,
partying
the
there.
bars, quite still open usually at that time. Sometimes there's parties. Sometimes if it's near the Circus Maximus, they're doing a night race. So yeah, I mean, most streets are kind of empty-ish. It really depends on what type of market or what type of it just depends on what type of stores or what type of commodities they have.
Yeah.
And also, again, vampires. Some of the Camarilla do actually keep businesses open at night because they may own a Capone or one of the stores in the Insulae. So you might
Right.
find some stores that have the equivalent of a night shift. So there are some areas that you can still find people in or get equipment from, but you have to kind of know the city, and in a lot of places you just kind of have to expect, yeah, if you go to a forum, you're probably not going to get much out of it.
Right. It's just a place to meet.
It's a place to meet, and that's about it. Unless you have ghouls. Honestly, it's kind of this is one of those situations where having a ghoul on hand is extremely useful.
Yep. Amazon doesn't deliver in the
Roman engineering
5th century.
should not be downplayed. The Dark Ages sucked so much, partially due to losing that engineering among them. Yep. Honestly, the fact that we lost almost every pillar of the society during that period due to the massive societal collapse did a lot of damage on progression. In fact, actually, it's one of the funny reasons why the church, for all of its flaws, was kind of useful, because they kept some of that shit going.
They kept writing. They were the only ones that were able to write.
And they actually had documentation from Rome and like inventions and shit too, because they were encouraged, especially like monk societies, to experiment with shit like that.
Mind you, they also threw out a bunch of other writing.
Unfortunately, yes.
There's a lot of
But
lost books that we're pretty sure that they had. They just didn't get copied down for whatever reason and were lost later.
I mean, think about it from my point of view. It's better to lose some than all, because imagine if those were also burned.
Yeah, but it's still kind of like, damn it, because it's like, There's some of these books where it's like they're referenced like 50 times, and we're pretty sure that there was a copy here at some point, but no one decided to copy it again, and it got lost.
So yeah, the streets are pretty difficult. Flames in the streets are not under control, so yeah,
Yeah, you might be having some minor panic attacks every time you go on the streets of Rome.
which is probably why most kindreds still prefer the necropolis tunnels.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can go on the streets. As for the temples, they are still much more common than churches, even if a lot of them are starting to become empty.
Yeah.
Temples are not really used for rites. Instead, the altar of the god stands in the front, and that's where the sacrifices are. The rest of it is traditionally just housing statues. So this is just kind of where you can go to honor your gods if you're a pagan kindred. And they go into details about some of the very important deities of Rome, which include Augustus, who's become a deity. Ceres, the goddess of grain, obviously. Janus, the god of gateways and beginnings. Jupiter, obviously. Juno, Mars, all of them. All of them.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that's interesting when you look at this is they talk about, first off, you're gonna have to, for the story use, they're targeted by Christians just as the pagans will target Christian temples sometimes.
Yeah,
You
in
might be
fact,
getting
actually,
into a
the
fight there.
Christians, to give you an idea, that's actually one of the reasons why Julian the Apostate became an emperor. The Christians in an earlier era were even more virulently kill crazy when it came to destroying them.
Yeah. So
Now
they
they
had,
know they can't get away with that shit to a degree, but they also know they're winning.
yeah.
But yeah, temples are targeted by Christians, so expect to get hassled sometimes.
Yeah, they might also set them on fire, you know.
Also, there is a small chance anytime you go to a temple because the dead are treated as unclean. Kindred ignore that, but every now and again there's a small chance that yeah, entering a temple might fuck you.
Because the gods may or may not be real when it comes to that.
Or their beliefs have a sort of power to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could happen. Now, besides the generic locations in Rome, there's generic locations in the necropolis as well. Like the catacombs.
Yeah, catacombs. So, what is the catacombs? Well, the catacombs are where the Romans would sometimes put their dead. They're little niches in the ground, in underground, where they'll put a body or ashes in most cases, where you have a niche and then you can go there to pay respects.
Yep, bodies are traditionally a sign of it being a Christian burial. Pagan burials usually are ash.
In Mediterranean, yeah, they tended to cremate their dead.
And catacombs vary. Some are nobles, some are hobos. It's a variety of them. And a lot of the catacombs have entrances to the necropolis, so this is another area you can kind of come in from. And there's hidden rock doors. As for how the necropolis is lit, it's not completely dark, but as the only source is naked flames, lighting is kept to a fucking minimum.
Yeah,
So
there's barely any.
you might want to pick up auspex. You might want to pick up auspex if you're going to hang out in the necropolis a lot and you don't have it. Just a heads up for those of you who are curious about the setting. As for the catacombs, they've been partly obliterated by the new church. So some tunnels just end at a wall now.
Yeah.
Other
Uh,
catacombs are churches.
yeah, there's more than one vampire who's woken up and been like, oh, I'm considered a saint now. Oh fuck. Because they crawled into where the saint is supposedly buried, or get to wherever else, chucked out the old corpse, and used that as a haven.
Or the funnier idea is they were the saint.
For some Lancia, that might be the case.
like the saint wakes up.
Yep.
All I was doing was to try to make mortals better, and now they're worshiping me as a saint. What?
What? Explain me. Do you have any idea how little that narrows it down?
And like they crawl out of the tomb, grab the local priest, and says, "Explain." And the priest is screaming because the saint woke up.
Yeah, you
Kids,
could definitely have that. So, uh, Kindred also kind of will use these as kind of like areas where they can meet, and because generally speaking, vampires kind of don't often trespass on other catacombs. It's considered rude. They'll sometimes meet down there, and sometimes vampires will use these as an excuse to talk to their mortal relatives,
yep,
where
because
they'll
mortals do come down here, and this is if you're really stupid, you can actually feed here too. But traditionally, it's mainly this is where vampires might meet mortals. This is a
yeah,
good way to talk to them or to talk to your keystones.
yeah.
Or you might respect your progenitors. Uh, I mean, if you're an asshole, if you need to use corpses for sorcery, you can do that.
Yep. It's also important to note that they kind of talk about that there's nothing really useful here,
Yeah,
unless
there's
you want to bash someone to death with some ashes or use a body for a ritual.
just rip off a skeleton's arm and use it as a weapon.
Yeah, why not?
He is risen. Allergic to sunlight, though. A bit odd that from Great and Spooky. Yeah. The Celle. Yeah, Cella is the main room of a
It is
pagan
the
temple.
main room of a temple, yeah. It has the statue of God, and Necropolis means a similar meaning, but a bit of a twist. This is, in fact, enshrining the kindred as God. This doesn't mean that they're worthy of being a god, but generally they pick a god who embodies qualities they find admirable, and that they then create a temple for that deity that is modeled after them. The statue is modeled after themselves, of course,
Because
and then given.
it's a Roman thing. They did that a lot.
Yes, the cell area then uses temples by pagan kindred,
And Greek, actually.
and
Greeks. I think Alexander the Great had some statues during like his
yeah,
conquests based on his looks for some of the gods.
yeah. It's also a good way for established kindred to take the measure of a newcomer to the higher rollers of society. It's an important part of establishing yourself as an actual political player.
Yeah, if
If
you're
you're
rich enough
modeling
to
yourself,
establish a Sele, yeah.
yeah. If you're immediately starting with Jupiter, it's very obviously like
You have ridiculous ambition, and you're either going to completely fuck it up, or you're actually going to be a real mover.
it's also noted that these do not have to be of the same sex. So you can have some very, very weird looking statues.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the Cella you worship at, that kind of determines what politics you're on.
Yep.
Oh, and you yourself use votives, which are which is I think is funny because that's more of an Eastern tradition. Votives. I'm not kidding. That's more like an Eastern Mediterranean Levant sort of thing. Votives, if you're wondering, are little statues that represent you to
Yeah.
pray in place of you. It's much more common than like your Mesopotamian regions because their gods were more capricious and demanded more worship. So this was a great way to get around that. Basically, I respect you, deities, but please, I need to work the fields to not starve. Don't destroy me.
Yep.
Some kudos that you can also come up with it to write on them. So
Yep.
yeah, this is a way to kind of determine your political faction. It's politicking at its finest.
Yeah. The value usually, I mean, they're attended by one of the vampires opposed to the sponsor. Attending your own is considered a sign of weakness.
Yeah. And there are lost Celle, which they were made by Kindred, but they're either dead or in torpor.
Yeah.
Those usually are not touched.
Yeah. Because if the vampire does come back,
They will destroy
uh,
you.
this is kind of like, kicking down their sandcastle. It's not exactly fun for them. Of course, I love the story use comment here. Arrogant kindred, which is most of them, may meet potential client kindred in their own cell.
Yep, and the conditions give you a lot of details on how they are.
Yeah.
And this is a great way to actually get the measure of other rivals because while not all vampires build one, vampires that actually have some influence will. They always will.
Yeah.
The Columbaria. This is a very common feature of the necropolis. It is so let's go into that. These rooms are modeled on the tombs of mortals and closely resemble catacombs. The main difference is that columbaria are normally placed to be hard for mortals to reach because these are havens. These are the equivalent of the insulae, if you're wondering. They're even worse.
Yeah.
It's a literal, like, you crawl into a hole and sleep.
Usually with a bronze plate over you with a bolts inside, very effective means of security.
Yeah, it's basically you know in Futurama the robot apartments where they're just like fucking closets, like it's a
Those
little
kind of
little
dudes,
tiny
yeah.
cell. It's like that. That is how you sleep. And some kindred actually trust each other enough to nest together. Often that's pretty fucking rare though.
Most of the time, it's literally I know about this shit.
Traditionally, if they are multiple vampires, there's a vinculum in case, or they're layering with child.
Mm-hmm.
The columbariums are very small. They're like
Yeah.
little holes, and yeah,
In most cases, though, there's sometimes treasure. There usually is a lair. There's weapons usually around because people are like, well, if someone's waking me the fuck up in one of these, they're probably here to kill me.
yeah, and they're pretty small. They can, I think, carve them to be bigger, but you know, it's
They
usually
can, but they usually don't. Uh,
you go back in the pod.
Go back in the pod. You drink the blood.
Go yeah,
You own nothing, and you are happy.
that is essentially the columbarium. It is a fucking nightmare. It is absolutely fucking atrocious.
Hey, rent.
No rent though.
No rent, yeah. Corridors. This is most of the necropolis.
Most are tall enough for vampires to stand upright and wide enough for two to pass each other. A few corridors are much larger than the minimum required space. The tunnels are a fucking maze because they've been established for centuries, and the Nosferatu just keep digging more. Most kindred that don't know where all of them lead, and other ones that do know where most of them lead, start offing people who know too much.
Oh, also, since there's a lot of corridors and they keep growing, you can build your own little columbaria.
Yeah.
You have to, yeah.
Go to an extent secured corner of the existing network so you can just dig something out there. And you also people build. They realize that it's really hard to figure out to hide where exactly you're sleeping. So the
Oh
better
yeah,
way to do
because
it is
here's
to
the
make
thing.
it just difficult and confusing to get to you.
So yeah, here's the thing. There's out of the corridors, there's the main thoroughfare ones, and then there's the maze of fucking trash and nightmares that are mostly abandoned or ignored or forgot. Like outside of the main areas, like you have no idea.
Yeah.
The main tunnels are kind of actually made to look not shit.
Yeah. They usually these ones have been established for quite a while. They expand them with mosaics, frescoes, columns,
Occasionally a statue or two, or like little
and
sconces and
sometimes
small
even
kind of braziers.
sometimes they even have braziers with oil and things like that. The minor ones are very small, obviously.
The minor ones are literally goblin tunnels.
Yeah, they're little goblin tunnels dug by Nosferatu half the time.
And some of them legitimately at any second could just collapse.
Yeah.
And some are so horrible that you have to go caving. Like you have to shimmy. Like you know oh god, caving. Spelunking is like the worst. In my opinion, I'm not even claustrophobic, but there's like a certain element that just invites claustrophobia when I think of caving, where you have to decompress your fucking chest and shimmy using your shoes as fucking paddles. Yeah, some of the tunnels are that fucking terrible. I mean, it's not bad if you're a gangrel because you can just phase through the rock, but you know.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Cubiacli are the basic rooms of the necropolis, which is, well,
Cubicle.
It's kind of like a forum, but not.
yeah, it's where you meet.
Yep, little meeting rooms. These also often they don't have use or furnishings. They do have doors. They were created for a purpose, but no one knows what the purposes are anymore.
Who knows? They can be used for basically anything.
And they do have some like it's not like it's not the goblin tunnels, it's not the brother worm tunnels. They are decorated to a degree, but they're known for their features really.
Yeah, like this one is
The dripping crack
headless.
because the
Yeah.
room partially collapsed and we don't know if the other half of the room will collapse. The headless
Dying
Remus.
boar with a yeah.
Most popular cubuli are slightly removed from the main corridors to reduce chance other kindreds might pass through while they're in use. So, essentially, these are meeting rooms. There's no booking system, by the way. It's just, you have to wait. These are your areas of arranged events. Yeah, the necropolis kind of sucks, in my opinion.
To live in, yes.
No, to be undead in, I think it sucks as bad. Oh, game rules, torture. Yeah, that's a thing you can do. They go into details mechanically, but I don't feel like it. So yeah, life in Rome. Remember, this is just a century after the crisis of the 3rd century.
It's not great. Also, here's rules for torture.
Yeah, it kind of. On top of that, the sewage system. Yeah, that's starting to silt up, and people aren't maintaining it as much as they should.
Yeah. Diocletian restores the rule of law. Basically, Constantine, though, brought back a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And
Diocletian restored the rule of law. He gave people a figurehead to look to, and but it was Constantine who brought the law crashing down. So Diocletian built it up. Constantine enforced.
yeah. Here's the thing. As a bishop of Caesarea, Constantine's official biographer wrote that there was no threat of capital punishment as a deterrent for the crimes, for the emperor himself preferred clemency. This is a fucking lie. If you have been listening to our other 2 on Rome,
We went on all of the horrible emperors.
Constantine killed a lot of people. And I do mean a lot of people.
And don't forget what his douchebag sons did.
Oh yes, they kind of changed a lot of how the things work to be more biblical, which means that rather than the long established Roman jurisprudence, we have a completely different system that is much harsher.
Thank you, Julian the Apostate. You may have punished the Christians, but let's be fair. Constantine's sons made them kind of deserve it a bit. A bit. Yeah, the laws that Constantine instituted, they're still in effect. They're still in effect to a degree. Petty thieves lose eyes, hands, noses, or ears. Witches burn at the stake, and so do people who wear magical amulets. That's Constantine's son, by the way.
There's now a whole class of men whose job it is to sniff out crimes against the empire.
The emperors have always had professional informants, by the way.
Yep.
Did they call them inquisitors?
Basically,
they were proto-inquisitors, yeah. Also, the Praetorian Guard is no more, mainly because they were so unreliable at their damn job.
Yeah. Speaking of which, the judicial savagery, it was once the tax collector could tax farm and extract profit from their taxes. That's gone now. Instead, if they're charging more than they should legally demand, they are beheaded. If they are guilty of pilfering and embezzling, lose hands. Judge found guilty of fixing a bribe, beheaded. Guilty of extortion, beheaded. Official who drags a woman of good standing who is in debt into the street and publicly humiliates her shall be put to death with the most exquisite tortures. Accountant or clerk who embezzles funds shall be tortured, mutilated, and barred from holding clerical employment for 2 years.
By the way, fun fact, reminder, Rome actually initially worked with corruption. Constantine made a big change by doing this.
Yes, and arguably made things a lot worse.
Which is saying a lot because the original corruption system was already pretty fucking bad by this point because there weren't people who knew how to exploit it.
Yeah.
At least exploit it in a way that made the country work.
Yeah, all things, the emperor...
That's the thing. Corruption can occasionally work. Augustus knew how to do it, and the crazy asshole who ran Paraguay at the beginning knew how to do it.
Yeah, it was once acceptable for a man who raped a girl who eloped with her to pay her parents compensation and take the girl as his wife. Constantine's laws are a bit different. When a man with no previous claim on a virgin rapes her when she is unwilling or elopes with her, the girl should be considered a suspect of being accomplice with the crimes, for her testimony has no weight. At any rate, whether the girl is willing or unwilling, her abductor shall be executed. He will be allowed no appeal. Slate anyone who helps them shall be have their mouth stopped by the swallowing of molten lead. If the girl is voluntary in the elopement, they will be executed. If unwilling, but they could have fought them away, they lose all legal right to their dowry. If the abductor makes an agreement with the virgin's parents, they're allowed to marry the daughter, or the parents hide the fact of their daughter's abduction or pretend nothing has happened, or do not adequately show their sorrow, they shall be exiled.
Yeah, Constantine was kind of a nut.
Yeah, most of these are basically like Rome is basically now under eternal martial law in many ways.
It kind of needed to be because they kept rioting and executing people. Not even kidding, Rome often would pick the most stupid option to be emperor by themselves, and it would take like people outside of Rome to step in and go, "What the fuck are you smoking?"
Yeah,
By this point, they realized like the meme about Paris being ungovernable, like no, Rome made Paris look like an orderly society during the 3rd and 4th century. There's a reason Roman emperor said, "Fuck this piece of shit city. I'm moving to Ravenna."
Shit, I'm out. Yeah. They go and talk about like there's quotes of course from various Roman sources here, but they talk about like
yeah, they're not brutal assholes or charismatic. No, they're just bureaucrats. Horrendous, creepy, gray-skinned bureaucrats.
The Senate is now a place where a man may wear a fine toga and talk about Rome without ever doing anything.
Yeah.
Like the Rome has like the city is small compared to like Pomonia or whatever else, but they do have their own military official in charge of the city, which entire regions have the equivalent, which is actually pretty impressive.
Yes, Rome at this point had a larger population than some Roman provinces.
Yep. Religion is where we get into the absolute fucking crazy shit. By the way, remember when they're talking about the Council of Thorns and the Edict of Milan and Vampire?
Yeah.
The first one. Guess what? There was another Edict of Milan. It was related to Christianity.
So yeah, they lived through the great
council?
persecution of the Tetrarchs because when Diocletian split the empire, all of them basically slammed hard on them.
Yep.
And because of that persecution being just effective enough to mobilize but not effective enough to crush and destroy, they gained a lot of numbers.
Yep.
And they became popular because Rome is collapsing slowly.
The crazy guys talking about the end of the world sound kind of right.
Roman fell before it fell. Yeah, Rome was a dumpster fire since like the 2nd century. Not the second. That's unfair to Rome. It only became a dumpster fire in the early 4th century, 300s.
Yeah. Before then, it was still pretty. It could get pretty bad, but it wasn't like really bad. Now it's actually like
an eternal dumpster fire that like the meme Carthago delenda est. No, Roma delenda est. Honestly,
Rome won't fucking die, basically, no matter what. So,
like I'm just envisioning Cato. Was it Cato who kept saying Carthage must be destroyed?
Carthage must be destroyed. Yeah,
he crawls from his grave as like a fucking sin eater. He sees Rome as a dumpster fire. He screams, "It must burn." It does. Barbarians destroy it, and he screams, "Why won't it fucking die?"
Yeah, they also look
at it fucking die.
So by the way, the Christians realize that the New Order is weird. The faith has to compromise with a lot of like other stuff where, pacifism can no longer be a thing that good Christians can do because we're now in control of an empire.
Yeah, they had. That's the thing. Christianity started as a pacifistic religion of all things.
Yes. And it very quickly once they were in charge became the exact opposite.
So there's a bunch of heresies. We went into details
okay,
a bit.
So we went into some of this, but there's the Nicenes and the Arians, which are the two big sects right now, which is the Nicenes are the ones where it's the Nicene Creed. The
Nicene Creed being formed
if
because they rejected Arianism.
Well, they're the Orthodox. Basically, if you've been to a Catholic church, you've probably at some point said the Nicene Creed.
Well, on top of that, like almost all even Protestant churches to a degree, although some of them have gone so into the fucking weeds, they've rejected Nicene completely now,
which I don't
which is funny.
understand whatsoever.
That's
But
funny. They
okay,
horseshoed all the way around. But most Christian churches that you're gonna run into are Nicene.
yeah,
There's a few crazy Protestant ones I think that are completely broken from it. And no, not I don't. No. Even the Church of the East, is Nicene.
yeah.
The real splits start with what's called Chalcedony, which is later.
Yeah. In any case, there's a couple of things where they're talking about like the nature of the heretics, and there's a lot of them. But the big ones right now are the two that have any hope of actually
Yeah, heresies are
dominating the
everywhere.
church are the Nicenes and the Arians. The Nicenes are the ones that are eventually going to have the upper hand. Right now, it's still a little bit up in the air, but it's pretty obvious that it's leaning in their direction right
It's
now.
leaning in the Nicenes because the Arian popularity is mainly among barbarians.
Mm-hmm.
And while they can settle, like at the end of the day, the administrative system is much more Nicene in base.
Yeah, I also love they talk about the Gnosticism. Basically, they absorbed a lot of the pagan mystery cults. Not quite exactly true,
This
but
is not
the rest of it,
so
the rest of it is
Gnosticism,
true.
if you're wondering, there are a bunch of Near Eastern kind of quasi-messianic beliefs. Some of them started from Christianity. Some of them were actually native beliefs that absorbed elements of Christianity and Greek
Others were
thought.
literally just Jewish offshoot splinters. Like the
There
Gnostic,
could be Jewish messianic cults as well. Some of them were.
yeah, the Gnosticism's a little bit weird.
There's dozens of them.
There's so many of us, dozens of us, maybe even.
So,
You know,
but one of the main common features, because of the inspiration from Zoroastrianism, is that the deity of the Old Testament is the demiurge.
the evil motherfucker that has doomed us to be stuck in this fake reality away from the
The
truly
Matrix.
divine.
He invented the Matrix.
Basically, this is the Matrix. Yes. So,
And Jesus was Neo.
and Jesus, yeah,
And
and
some of
they're
the beliefs besides that are weird. One of my favorites is literally, oh yeah, Cain was actually an agent of God to try to free, like all the evil figures in the Bible, they were actually good all along because they needed to be used as the counterman to show what you should not do, or they could do what the others could not.
or it's like they're necessary because they have to happen for
The
salvation.
funniest being Judas.
The Judas one actually makes sense though.
Yeah, that one makes sense. There are those who legitimately said Cain didn't do nothing wrong though.
Yeah, there were those. The ones that go like Judas really didn't do anything wrong and was probably following Jesus and God's orders are the really interesting ones because it's like, yeah, for the sacrifice to happen, someone has to kill Jesus. It has to be done.
And then there's the ones who took Zoroastrianism to the point, inspiration to the point where they actually would screw their own sisters, the Messalians.
Yeah, Messalians. There's a lot of fun heresies that if you dig into, it gets into a lot of it is hearsay
the
because most of the
there's the Apollinarians, which actually was like Jesus is actually a flesh golem driven by the divine mind of God himself.
which is A, fucking rad, and B, like the also fucking rad.
Yeah.
I can't think of a more radical idea for Jesus than he is a flesh golem piloted by God. Like he's this fucking like Gundam robot. You know? That's kind of what I'm
The basic
getting out of that.
concept is his flesh was divine, but his flesh was mortal, but his mind was divine.
Yeah.
So God piloted him as a mech.
Mobile suit Jesus.
Because now there are vampires that have looked at undeath, their state, and said, yeah, this is the product of Gnosticism. It's true.
They're like Gnosticism. They're like, yeah, I think that Gnosticism has a fucking point. Which, when we were talking about undead god beings, yeah, I can see it.
But here's the funniest part. The reason you don't see them at all, this is their explanation for it, you don't see any of them at all because most of them just intentionally kill themselves now.
Yeah, they're just like, fuck it. We're out. Peace.
Not all of them. There's a few that stay because they're like, oh, good. I can indulge in the world of darkness. forever. And those
Yeah.
are also equally reprehensible and probably killed to a kindred.
Yeah, it's one of those that it's like, oh, these are like the really dangerous ones. Hundreds of. In any case,
Oh
there's a
god, no,
few
no.
others.
Squirrel Killer has a great one. My favorite recent bit of insanity I've heard on the street from crazy men on corners is Judas only accepted the silver so that he wouldn't go on the cross and become immortal to guide us for eternity. Jesus
Okay.
begged for suicide by crucifixion so he did not become the immortal God Emperor to rule over us. Please, Judas, I don't want that role. Please, rat me out. That's amazingly insane. I love it. That's like serious mental illness.
That's amazing. So Marcionianism is
Oh,
kind of
yeah, I mentioned
interesting.
Marcionism, yeah.
This is a bit different. No, Marcionism is slightly different, but it's
Well, no, no,
basically
no.
a
I mentioned Apollinarianism, but yeah, Marcionism is. I'm surprised they brought this one up.
basically that he taught the Jewish faith is completely true. That distinction between God's goodness and his divine justice. So there's the God of Jesus and the God of the Jews, which are separate entities, and
Yup.
yeah.
By the way,
Uh,
he also advocated throwing out all of the Old Testament at one point, if I recall correctly.
yeah, there's Christian sects that do that these days too.
Like they legitimately just they take the Bible, cut out the Old Testament, throw it away.
Yeah, Gospels are all that matters.
No, not just the Gospels, but the later parts of the New Testament too.
So in any case, Valentinianism is another one, which is
Oh no, there's
quite
more crazy. Jewish faith is completely true. There was a jealous God who had created man and adopted the Jews as his own people. That Christ had come to show that there was a greater God.
yeah,
Jewish God less good than my God.
It's a
yeah. Like this is
heresy
a
of,
fun one.
this is a heresy of both because they're saying greater God, but that Jesus wasn't the Messiah.
No, he's
No,
not the Messiah
the
of the
Jewish
Jews.
Messiah. He's still the Messiah. It's just that he's not the Jewish Messiah.
But no, because the Jewish Messiah is on his way eventually, but is insignificant and pointless compared to Jesus.
Yeah,
This is
this is
amazingly
wild.
insane.
Yeah,
A savior sent by the Creator's own Creator. Marcion's most curious innovation was the distinction between God's goodness, which he associated kindness and forgiveness, and his divine justice, which was tempered by the former qualities. The God of the Jews possessed justice, which was meted out at every opportunity, while the God of Jesus was greater and forgave all.
yeah. The many actually, there's quite a few Marcionites that are in fact in Lancia et Sanctum.
Yeah, many of the worshippers of the spear were Marcionites in life. When Longinus slew Christ, he was acting on behalf of the just God rather than good God.
And then
Alright.
all that fall in damnation should, yeah.
Does that mean they're
We're the
thinking they're
instruments of the
Jewish?
lesser god, yeah. Valentinius is a fun one, where he'd been taught by a disciple of St. Paul. He was beloved by his students. Most of his fellow clergy didn't like them. He rejected their alleged wisdom and split off to form his own church. He rejects the authority of individuals while basically trying to reconcile Gnostic stuff, where he
Because there is
basically
some
says
Gnostic elements you could probably incorporate, but
his
they had
basic
a lot of
idea
crazy shit.
is that there are in fact other divine entities other than God. It's just that they're lesser than him and subservient.
And attributed the creation of a broken and pain-filled earth with the failures.
The
He
failure of all
determined that
them.
the creature at fault was the spirit of wisdom.
Yeah. Valentinius is notable among the dead for being rejected by the Monachus directly. The Dark Apostles' embrace or adoption by Longinus. He was an ardent anti-Valentinian. Some vampires have taken this to suggest that they should eliminate them. But the dispute over Monachus's pre-Longinian writings continue.
So yeah, basically only brought up because Monachus fucking hated them.
Yes. Other
And they go into
there's
details about there's schisms and traitors. Carthage, the Christians became incensed when the Romans sent them a bishop who had once been a traitor.
Yeah, there's the Donatists
Oh
and
yeah,
then the
Donatists.
non-Donatists.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you're wondering, the Donatists were most popular in North Africa. Their concept is very simple. They were nice. They are Nicene, but they had a specific belief on what they called the relapsy. Those who, to save themselves, would actually lie about their faith.
They said go fuck themselves to those guys.
Yeah. I'm hearing a bit of ocean noises. Is it just me?
No, I'm hearing it too.
Huh.
Huh.
That's fine. Ignore the ocean. It's fine.
It was Imsit.
Oh, that's
Okay.
unfortunate.
Probably.
So
Uh,
yeah,
it-
basically the Donatists. I think they also had elements of iconoclastic beliefs because they were
Yeah.
kind of a frugal people. But as a
Yeah.
whole, they were basically just Nicenes who really fucking hated apostates, and they considered hiding your faith to be apostatism.
in any case, the next one is
Manichaeans and Jews.
Manichaeisms. They do mention
And
them, yes.
Jews.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
bad
bad
time.
time.
Also, they
to be
mentioned the
one, though.
Jews got, yeah. The
So
Manichaeism are really fun, though.
unlike the Christians, though, the Jews actually managed to make a deal with the Romans early on to allow the Jews to worship their own deity.
As long as they didn't make trouble.
Mainly
'Cause
because they tried to make trouble, and the Roman response was to basically continue killing them until they begged until they begged forgiveness, and then the Romans were like, "Yeah, fuck off, we're moving you. We'll allow you to worship your shit god, but you can't ever do something this fucking insane again."
And then I believe we did it again.
Yes, and that's why they
Yeah.
kicked out
That's
so
why
many of you.
they burned down the temple again and all that shit, yeah.
But after that, the Jews became pretty okay people for the Romans to work with, and that was more than enough.
Funnily enough, the Romans really are the Christians don't like them for some reason. Who knows?
The pagans
Something
tolerate
about
them.
killing their god.
Yeah. Whatever. In any case, Manichaeism.
It's because of the Christ killer thing.
Yeah. In any case, Manichaeism, because it was really the Romans who did it, but blame the Jews because it's more politically viable.
Well, also, in the Bible itself, it's hinted that the Romans legitimately were kind of pissed that they were dragged into this.
And they almost certainly would have been because this was to them definitely internal affairs.
Yeah, like the Romans were the ones to order the death, but and they even make a point where like one of the early messianic figures of like an actual violent messiah, Barabbas, was also on the chopping block. The Romans had to let him fucking walk or face a revolt.
Yeah.
Because it was either pick the Jesus, who was causing more trouble in their society than Barabbas, or condemn the actual murderer and, well, you know.
Face a large scale revolt.
Yeah, which they weren't really in the mood to deal with at the time.
Oh, they
Who did
would
Barabbas
end up
murder?
having to do it soon enough.
Yeah.
Who did Barabbas murder? Was it?
I think it was like political murders of like either Jesus components or like an actual Roman official. He was
Yeah,
like he was part of he was a proto fanatic.
I'm guessing it would be a Roman official because the crowd would be like, yes, we're letting the Romans not kill somebody who killed one of them.
It was
Getting
something
away
like
with
that,
it.
yeah. But yeah, Manichaeans, they were followers of the Persian mystic Mani, who essentially he wanted to reform Zoroastrianism and believed that Christianity was close but not quite complete. So he
Yeah.
kind of fused the two of them.
And it was kind of nuts.
Yeah, like to give you an idea, their holy book was called the Evangelion.
Yep.
So yeah, the Manichaeans, they keep themselves private. They gather at night. They were actually fairly popular in Egypt to a degree. Alexandria was actually one of their main areas.
In any case, they also give a talk about monks and all these other mystics, which
asceticism's a big thing.
there's a few that like do some weird shit where they will like there's the
they go into details
Cenobites.
about Manichaeism, yeah. It also does have elements of Buddhism, by the way.
Yep.
According to the
And
man
then there's the pagans, which, they exist still.
By the way, he was eventually crucified and flayed at the command of the king of Persia, Mani.
Yeah.
Essentially, what killed them off were the Christians being legalized, because the Christians fucking despised them.
Yeah, because they had the better story, honestly.
I mean, when you say, first of all, when you say Cain is Eve's son by the Prince of Darkness,
Yep.
and Abel, was not only Cain's brother, but his son by the rape of Eve.
Yeah, there's some
yeah.
crazy cosmological nonsense.
Yeah, there's some fucking crazy bullshit, which is why I'm like, this is rad. This is great.
Okay, but did they make their holy book out of dead mothers of their priests? Actually, I'm writing that down. That's a metal idea. No. Another thing Manichaeism, if I recall correctly, is they lean towards vegetarianism.
Yeah,
Did
they're
somebody
one of those weird, bizarre splinter cults. Basically.
I know during their equivalent, they had an equivalent festival similar to Cedar, where they legitimately could not eat meat at all, like any form of meat, and that included shit like fish. Like they could stick to cheese and lentils, and that was about it. Because of the suffering, innate suffering, and it was like an attempt to purify and refill your inner light. But yeah, monks and hermits, asceticism's a thing. Very popular. Christians in particular had a bunch. There's also Cenobites, which that's where you might know Cenobites more from Hellraiser, but the concept comes from very extreme ascetics who would like forego things.
Yeah, baptized won't even go near a monk or a hermit. Well, pagan criminals, bandits wouldn't have any qualms about attacking a Cenobite, but they don't have anything worth stealing. And most people either listen to them or
Just ignore them.
or just stay the fuck away because they're obviously fucking crazy.
But yeah, pagans. It's just all of the
It's pagans.
polytheistics.
There's not a
fine.
lot of it
We
to
don't really need to go
go
into
into.
too
Yeah.
much detail with them.
There's of course the start of the theurgy, which doesn't really go anywhere. There's the Christians versus the pagans, where they're talking about all the shit about the like
Basically, Christianity wants to crush paganism and convert people
Yeah.
from the old Roman gods, and they're dedicated to learning Roman law so that they can do this.
Yes, the mysteries are, of course,
A
as we
variety of
mentioned
gods
before.
that have their essentially, it's like the Freemasons lodge, where it's like a private society where you have to have the beliefs and
Like the ISIS cult, the Magna Mater, the Sibyllians.
There's also the cult of Mithra, which was
The
another
cult of
one.
Mithras, which they talk about here.
There's also the Eleusinian mysteries.
Yeah, Mithras is a fun one where they talk about like that Mithras have like a bunch of these really
fun fact
blood rituals.
They not only had blood rituals, but there was actually like an almost Fight Club like rule where non-initiates were actually expected to be killed if they ran into one of their lodge rituals, because they often did it privately.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the catacombs.
Yep.
So occasionally, a guy might disappear because they accidentally stumbled onto a cult of Mithra moment.
Yeah. So then, of course, they talk about the games.
Yeah, the Sibylians, who, these are the crazy castrati. Romans politely call them eunuchs, and less politely call them perverts, because they're essentially weird, coon-brained psychos who cut their balls off.
They make their livings offering oracles and performing fertility rites.
They're psychotic coomers, basically.
I don't even call them that. They're just weird.
I'm calling them coomers because it's funnier. And then there's the followers of Mithras. Yep, blood drinkers, blood cultists. Yep, they're blood. They use blood. They have like
They
weird.
may be fucking with vampires. Who knows?
Yeah. Panem Circenska. One day, appointed as a circus day, the leaders of Rome order a day free from commerce.
Yeah, we should probably stop soon. When I'm looking at the time.
Yeah, I'm just gonna see how far.
There's a few more pages here. We're
That's not happening, Chief. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is, as I said, this book is really dense.
Well, no, this
Which is-
chapter is pretty long too.
Yeah, this book is pretty dense, and that's part of the appeal of it, in my opinion, at least.
So we'll we covered the bread, we covered the faith. I think we'll cover circuses next time we get back in.
Yeah, we've gotten another. Let me see how many pages here. I want to say 30 pages.
Under 100. Under 100.
We covered about 30 pages. Yay! 33, 36 pages.
That's not bad given how fucking dense this was, though.
Yeah, these as I said, one of the reasons why I think that this is a fantastic book is that it is a very.
Also, note we didn't go off topic that much either.
We really didn't. There's a lot in this section for how do you actually play in Rome? How do you do all this? How do you? What's the setting like? What's
What's
areas
the
you go
necropolis
to?
like? Which that was kind of important, and I learned the necropolis is kind of shit.
It is kind of shit to live in, but it exists and it's there, and it's something that you have to deal with.
And it's still better than the insulae, which are somehow both better and worse.
Yeah.
Because at least in your death coffin with the fucking bronze door, you don't have to worry about some asshole like pushing it open because it's a piece of crap and stealing your wallet. So yeah, we're gonna go into the bread and circuses. We might actually be able to skim that depending on how much they go into. But as for next week, I'm tempted to do Renegade Crowns. I'm tempted. I could be talked out of it.
I have no problem with that, honestly, because like this is a book where you do have to take bites out of it, almost.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's not
either-
like we can do Hardwired Island because that piece of shit's done. That thing is done.
And somebody is very happy that it is done.
Yeah, Imsa, because he had to drag me for like 3 hours screaming. It was a pain.
God,
I mean,
I
it
still need
also
to catch
broke
up on
him
those.
too. Let's be fair.
it broke me with the common right reference.
Oh, that's what got you?
The what
Just-
reference?
There was a guy in a bug costume
Oh,
doing
yeah, that.
stunts, and I just as
The
soon as I
part
saw
that
him,
got
just,
me
I'm
was
done.
the Nazi who was so obsessed with being white, he wore only suits of white.
But
There is also
why?
the "Why are you gay African banker?" We came up with a funny headcanon where the evil Norwegian Nazi man was a proud cuckold as the African banker because they're bedfellows.
Oh, right, I remember. Now I remember this guy. Yeah.
That entire segment was bad. Unlike this one, I honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that we went for 3 hours, it honestly felt more like 2.
Yeah. This book it's good.
Yeah, I honestly could have gone for shit another hour, but I understand this thing called time.
Yeah, and we're hitting the the 2 hour the 3 hour mark, and it's
3 hour
like
7. I have my eye on it. So yeah, next week we're either going to do Renegade Crowns or some other book. I might even actually on the Discord, because we have one for those of you who are unfamiliar. The link should be in the description. I might hold a poll on it. I am committed. I'm pretty committed to doing the Renegade Crowns because it has the generation tables. I love whenever a book has generation tables for stuff like that, where it allows you to build not only regions of the border princes because they're not mapped, so you can make your own region, but you can also make your own border princes, and that sort of shit's I think is pretty cool. And it also gives you insight onto hobo land, murder hobo land, because that's what that area of Warhammer is. But like I said, I'll probably come up with a poll because there's other books I can cover. There's a giant monster attack. There's what's the one I have where it's like not Delta Green, but the occult war or something. There's a bunch of trash and interesting books we can cover. So I'll figure it out, or there will be a poll sometime over the beginning of the week. Before we go, don't come to Discord if you don't like Warhammer. We'll yell Warhammer at you. Yeah, to a degree. Also be careful. I have very strong opinions on Age of Sigmar. The only thing that they've ever done right were models, and even then I have issues with some of them. I don't like Age of Sigmar.
he doesn't like Age of Sigmar, of which
I dislike Age of Sigmar for, in my opinion, it's actually similar to when we went with the Christ Killer thing. Similar logic. It killed fantasy. I'll never be able to like it because of that. Though to be fair, honestly, let's be fair to it. They killed fantasy before they tried to cash in on it. Let's be fair. I'll be fair to it in that regard.
At least they're bringing fantasy back.
In a prequel, meaning that I know how it ends.
Sometime.
With a big,
Nobody knows
tantruming,
when,
angry
though,
vampire
honestly.
boy.
We'll hear about it on the 29th.
So
Oh
yeah,
shit, they're gonna announce it on the 29th? Really?
yeah, a
I
bit
think
of
so.
news there. So with that in mind, have a good night, everyone. Like I said, don't know what we'll exactly cover this next week, but we'll see. Have a
Okay.
good evening.
You too.